Chapter 751. The transformation and strengthening project of Team 9 provinces was booming, and Chen Eng's financial income was also rising day by day. Because he didn't care about meat and vegetables, he had accumulated a large number of props that the reincarnators used to pay off their debt. These props and resources prompted him to germinate more inspiration. The reincarnators were the most realistic group, and most of them struggled on the line of survival every day. This also meant that most of Chen Eng's goods were necessities for them, which was quite similar to the food trade in the real world. Therefore, Chen Ong also tried his best to learn the operation methods of the grain merchants in the modern society of the real world. First, he spent a lot of money to buy a large number of low-level items in the Samsara Spaces trading market, artificially raising the value of low-level items and creating panic. With the reward points in Chen Eng's hands, he quickly raised the price of low-level bloodlines, technological items, and magic items in God's space to a relatively excessive level. On the one hand, he created panic, so that the suppliers of low-level items would be reluctant to sell items. On the other hand, he used the relatively large capital in his hands to absorb the items on the market, causing a shortage in the market. According to Chen Eng's analysis, the output of the item market in God's space was relatively stable. Except for him, no other samsara team could provide a large number of mass-produced low-level items. What did this mean? A monopoly position. It did not take a strong financial sensitivity to analyze that the pricing power of the current low-level items on the market was completely in the hands of Chen Ong. There was a great similarity between the items in God's space and the food in the real world. They were both short-term, irreplaceable goods. Samsara travelers hovered on the edge of death in every mission, which meant that they had to quickly sell off the items they didn't need and purchase materials that could quickly increase their strength. Otherwise, they might die in the next mission. This kind of urgency, such as farmers who had no harvest during the famine, factory owners who went bankrupt during the economic crisis, and gold diggers during the gold rush, had always been the favorite of profiteers like Chen Ong. Due to the urgency of their lives, they would be exploited at a high price. After causing a shortage of low-level items in the market, the samsara travelers who could trade fairly in the market in the past were surprised to find that there were no low-level items to choose from in the public market. Their exchange and purchase opportunities were suppressed, and the only team that could provide relatively comprehensive items for sale and personal enhancement was Team 9 Provinces. A primitive barter market was completely suppressed and controlled by the monopoly capitalists. In the end, they would find that the only thing that could quickly transform the items in their hands into strength was Team 9 Provinces controlled by Chen Ong. What was even more terrifying was that in order to create panic, Chen Ong was like a landlord in a disaster year seizing food to create a food shortage, waiting for small farmers to go bankrupt, taking the opportunity to buy and sell land. In the name of free volunteers, Chen Ong strengthened many low-level samsara teams. Although these samsara teams were nominally free, in reality, they were extremely ruthlessly exploited. When they came out of Chen Eng's place, they all glared at others with bloodshot eyes, looking as if they wanted to eat others up. Since there was a first batch of samsara travelers whose strength had skyrocketed, the news that Chen Ong wanted to spread was logical. Those samsara travelers who had been exploited to the point that they had nothing would definitely act against their competitors in the next mission. If it was slaughter mode, then they would kill and steal their treasures and points. If it was peace mode, then they would kidnap and extort. No matter how one looked at it, the next mission would be extremely dangerous. Too many people had the determination to kill. The difficulty of the storyline mission suddenly increased. At this time, some samsara teams were forced by this atmosphere to sell the items in their hands at a low price. Of course, there was no doubt that most of these items would be bought by Chen Ong. Then, because of the lack of market, they had no choice but to deliver them to Chen Eng's doorstep and buy custom-made enhancements and modifications at a relatively high price. Moreover, they had aggravated the tense atmosphere in God's realm. In this way, most of the low-level reincarnators, who occupied the entire God's realm, were involved in the arms race. Their only supplier was, of course, the big capitalist Professor Chun. If it wasn't for God's direct exchange guarantee, it was hard to predict how high Chun Ang's financial operations would have been able to raise the modification and enhancement market. In his spare time, Chun Ang operated according to this plan for a few days. On the fifth day, the public trading market in God's space collapsed. The flow of items in the market was at least 10 times lower than usual. A large number of items were sold, and the market was empty. Immediately, the tense atmosphere among the samsara travelers intensified. At this time, the only one who could provide them with short-term enhancements and a supply of items was Dr. Chen's. The market instantly became irrational. A large number of samsara travelers began to fight for the enhancement opportunities that Chun Ang had released, striving to win a chance of survival in the upcoming bloody storm. For this reason, they mortgaged their treasured items to Chun Ang at a low price, and bought the high-tech industrial items in Chun Ang's hands at a price several times higher than the normal market price. Chun Ang's free modification experiment agreement was like clouds, and there were also a lot of people in front of the paid items. The reason why in such a short period of time, the number of experimental volunteers could be increased to the point that there was no end to them, and the mortality rate of the short-term experiment was so high was thanks to the contribution of this financial means. Looking at the 9 provinces team, which showed an exponential number of real and fake reward points and prop reserves, Hong Fan was stunned and lost in thought. These are all ours? Zhao Yingqi sighed with emotion, heartless. As she said this, she casually pulled a 6-star silver magic accessory into her storage space. Li Mingyi said excitedly, "Doctor is so powerful. You can manipulate the samsara travelers in the palm of your hand. You can change the wind and clouds in the palm of your hand. We've already started to target those teams with outdated equipment and will be in danger in the next mission. We'll give them high-interest loans. If they don't take the loan, they'll die. 90% of the money will be paid back. So some of the reward points and props have been loaned out. Now this is only a part of it. After the mission is over, we will harvest another wave with the contract witnessed by God." Zhang Ziqiang and the others were stunned, looking at Chun Ang and said, "Doctor, you have worked hard. How many samsara travelers want to kill us now?" Chun Ang said modestly, "Not at all, I just did a little work. Now the samsara teams that borrowed from us think that Ketu wants to kill us, and the debt is gone. Of course, they won't have the chance. There are about 7,000 low-level squads in the entire main God space, and more than 2,000 of them have borrowed from us. As for the rest, because of the financial manipulation this time, as well as the exposure of our windfall, more than half want to kill us. They are all a bunch of chickens and dogs. It's hard to say how many of them will survive this time. It's nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about." Chapter 752. The bustling scene gradually faded away. After the music ended and people dispersed, Chun Ang walked out of the laboratory slowly and casually hung his white coat at the entrance of the laboratory. The public space of the 9 States team had been transformed into a huge ring-shaped base. Chun Ang, who did not lack reward points, had generously created dozens of different classified laboratories. He walked through the ring-shaped corridor. Behind the doors of the laboratories, all kinds of subtle rustling sounds could be heard. It was the instinctive struggle of the experimental samples. Chun Ang ignored them and went straight to the door of a small laboratory. Looking at the darkness in the laboratory, Hong Fan silently appeared next to him. Then, they looked at the somewhat small laboratory together. This place, which was not strange at all, made Hong Fan feel fear from the bottom of his heart. Looking at Alex, who was suspended in the nutrient solution in the laboratory, Hong Fan sighed with emotion. "Doctor, I'm afraid he has stayed in the virtual consciousness for too long. The virtual consciousness system you created itself has the function of controlling the human consciousness sense of time. Moreover, in the virtual consciousness, the environment created is a dark secret room that completely seals off the five senses and has no sound or light. In this kind of environment, the human's perception of time itself will be stretched infinitely. What's more, Doctor, you also used the fuzzy environment software to stretch this sense of time by 100 times. Now, he has spent hundreds of years awake in a completely dark and senseless world. Previously, we could still observe his brain activity, as well as the struggle of his spirit and consciousness. But in the early stage of the experiment, this kind of violent fluctuations of consciousness gradually eased, and now it has almost stopped. Is he brain dead? Chen Ong smiled and shook his head. According to the test, there was a period of time when his mental activity was a little abnormal, but now it has completely recovered. According to the data, although the fluctuations of his consciousness are calm, there is no weakening reaction like in people in a vegetative state. From the results of mental magic and psionic energy detection, not only did he not die of madness, but he also gradually understood the true meaning of life. His current mental state is even better than before. It has completely met my requirements. Hong Fan did not feel that Alex's previous excited mental activity was abnormal at all. Anyone who had been tortured in the boundless darkness for hundreds of years had the right to go crazy, hate, and curse. He even felt that whatever Alex did after he woke up was normal. From that mental activity, it could be seen that he had struggled, begged, suffered, and despaired. In the end, when he found that everything was to no avail, he inevitably fell into a state of loneliness. For most people, this state of loneliness could completely mean that their personality and spirit were dying. But Chen Ong believed that it was completely possible for Alex to sprout a little vitality in this withering and dying spirit and maintain his personality. His life is already dense enough, Chen Ong concluded. After such cruel torture, he claims that he is firm enough, but I don't believe it. I don't think any emotion can be firm enough. So, I have to polish the impetuous parts in his personality and see if he can still maintain such firmness after going through a blank period that can wear out a person's complete personality. Furthermore, this is a necessary condition for the next step of his transformation. Hong Fan could only feel sympathy for what happened to Alex. He knew what Chen Ong was trying to do. He was definitely delighted to see a rather special experiment subject, so he was completing the preliminary preparation of the experiment subject, magnifying, cultivating, and refining the special side of a special subject, in preparation for the next step of the experiment. Hong Fan speculated in his heart. When Alex walked to Professor Chen with hatred and determination, Chen Ong, who originally only planned to do a long-term experiment to verify his theory, keenly sensed the new experimental condition in Alex, a soul in despair and pain. At that time, Alex might have already thought of the thought experiment of virtual consciousness in absolute darkness and long-term self-torture. It was just that no subject had such experimental qualities. Professor Chen would not do things that he was not confident in. He had never advocated wasting subjects with low success rate. Therefore, when he saw Alex's strong personal feelings and determination, he quickly thought of a way to complete the experiment: hatred. The long period of darkness was enough to wear down all human emotions, but it would also cause great mental pain. Chen Ong planned to use this pain to strengthen human emotions. Then, this emotion could only be defined as hatred. By feeling the pain, the subject would be able to strengthen the hatred of the subject toward the host of the experiment. With this hatred, the consciousness would not be obliterated in the blank period. In fact, other than this, the whole experiment could be completed in many ways. It could not be ruled out that there really was a subject who, with great perseverance, knew himself in the long period of loneliness, grasped the sense of time, and broke through the mental barrier of the four heavenly barriers. It could also not be ruled out that there was a person who, with great wisdom, could comprehend the secrets of consciousness and the nine senses, and broke through the divine barrier of the four heavenly barriers. Or there might be someone who, with the love of the individual, could sublimate emotions, grasp the beauty of life in the endless loneliness, and rely on an immortal hope to survive the endless darkness. Be it hatred or love. If Fu Hongyan were to undergo such a test, she could also rely on the path of extreme egoism to easily pass the test. In fact, any 10-star God-level expert would be able to pass this test as long as they broke through the mental barrier. However, this test was not the goal, but the condition. Only when this condition was satisfied could the subsequent experiments be carried out. Therefore, Chun Ong had chosen a low-star reincarnator, who clearly did not have such a high level of mental cultivation, to carry out the modification experiment. This modification experiment plan incorporates a lot of content, and it is considered an interdisciplinary experiment. On one hand, I want to verify the modification of the planet's magnetic field using the muscle tendon changing Jing. I want to see if I can use the macroscopic force of the planet's magnetic field to grasp the most microscopic four fundamental forces, and reach the realm of unifying the macroscopic and microscopic forces. On the other hand, I want to prove the subtle connection between the objective material world and human consciousness represented by the nine senses in the small universe's power system. Finally, I have some ideas on the practical use of the small universe, which is a reflection of the existence of the objective world by human consciousness. In the New World Evangelion, there is an at-force field that can block almost all external attacks and can only be counteracted by the same force field. Its essence is a wall that separates oneself from the objective world, which is the barrier of the heart. In the previous experiment with humans, although it failed, it gave me a lot of knowledge about the at-force field. Then, what is the connection between these 3 points? Chen Ong suddenly asked Hong Fan. Hong Fan was speechless. Other than his mind being in a mess, he felt a chill down his spine and deep fear. How could he understand all this? Sigh. Chen Ong sighed. If you do this, how can I be at ease leaving the follow-up experimental monitoring to you? Leave it to me. Hong Fan was surprised. Yes. The next mission is a solo mission given to me by the Chief God. I also want to let you experimental subjects compete freely in a wild state and collect more experimental data, so I agreed. In your next mission, you will definitely meet my most successful experimental subject. The relevant testing, control, and data collection work will all be handed over to you. After all, in the team, you are the only one who has successfully modified the bloodline of the radiation blood race and is equipped with the Great Radiation Buddha Sutra. Your combat power can suppress those defective experimental subjects. After saying that, Chun Ong did not look at Hong Fan's reaction. He continued to analyze Alex's modification model clearly. What connects these 3 points is consciousness. The core of Alex's transformation is consciousness. He is the future Shaolin Apostle and Saint Seiya. The 3 systems of Buddhism, microcosm, and at-force field have the same core. Although the I Ching scripture is a lost martial art, it also has the I Ching scripture, which is a power system that specializes in the cultivation of the 9 consciousnesses. The I Ching scripture combines literature and martial arts into one, which is why it can carry out the true meaning of the universe that Dharma comprehended. The muscle tendon changing scripture forms a magnetic field and follows the true meaning of the universe. The small universe uses individual consciousness to reflect the path of the objective world. One of the 2 paths is based on matter, simulating the star magnetic field and tracing back to the spirit of the universe. The other is based on the spirit and simulating the material form of the universe. One is positive and the other is negative, and they complement each other. When the 2 are combined into one, together with the mathematical model of the universe that I've modified in Alex's brain, with the data from scientific observations of the universe, He will be able to break through that blurry boundary and reach the realm of the universe that the Saint Seiya cannot reach. When that time comes, you will not be his match," Chen Ong said to Hong Fan seriously. Hong Fan was stunned. He suddenly understood and said, "I understand. Doctor, what you mean is that, if I do not continue to improve, I will be beaten to death. I am Alex's monitor, and he is also the person who forced me to integrate the Great Radiation Buddha Sutra." "It's good that you understand," Chen Ong said calmly. "This is the experimental plan that I formulated at the beginning. Later, I was inspired by Peng Bo and revised it a few times, adding the structure of the force field. According to the experimental data from the previous human experiment on Pandora, I vaguely grasped a trace of the essence of the force field. Later, I thought, since the force field is determined by the strength of the barrier of the heart, then what kind of barrier of the heart can compare to a universe? If a universe has an force field, how strong and sturdy would it be? Because of the experimental sample, I tested it on the planet Pandora. As the collective body of the planet's consciousness, the strength of Pandora's force field is shocking. It is about the strength of 100 inherent barriers of the far from the mortal world. It is almost impossible for a 10-star power to break through this heavy barrier. This is just a planet. What if it is a universe? Hong Fan was so shocked that he was speechless. It is already a miracle that the planet's consciousness can be successfully condensed. How can there be something like the consciousness of the universe? The universe is a material world that is billions and trillions of times larger than the planet. If it has consciousness, then wouldn't it be the legendary Heavenly Tao? You want to install an force field on the Heavenly Tao? That's why. If we can't install an force field on the Heavenly Tao, then what will happen if we let someone with an force field simulate the consciousness of the universe? Hong Fan turned his head abruptly and saw the faint powerful force field fluctuations coming from Alex in the culture tank. He exclaimed, "Alex?" He asked Chen Ong nervously, "What kind of result will there be?" "I don't know either." Chen Ong shrugged and said, "That's why we need to experiment." "But aren't I in charge of controlling him?" Hong Fan asked anxiously. Chen Ong sighed and pressed his shoulder. "A person's life naturally has to rely on their own effort. Of course, they also have to consider the process of history. What about this thing? This is life. Comrade Hong Fan, the organization has decided to let you be the monitor. If something unexpected happens, just accept your fate. If you are not willing to accept your fate, what about the Great Radiation Rulai Sutra? It can create miracles. As the chief scientist of the 9 provinces team, how can I be assigned to a solo mission just like that? It's all the fault of the chief god. I'm leaving tomorrow. Your mission will begin in 3 days, so you must complete the modulation of Alex now. The modification of the force field has long been completed, and the degree of integration is good. Under the strong stimulation of the small universe during the space-time gap in the consciousness, it has already begun to fuse with the small universe. The modification this time is mainly on the consciousness. It can be said that this is a pioneering experiment in the transformation of the consciousness. Alex will gradually master the modified 9 senses, and then gradually fuse them and activate them. Chapter 753. The atmosphere in London at the end of the 20th century was relatively peaceful. The long period of prosperity in the Western world had allowed the city to enter a golden age. It had begun to reveal the aura of the Virgin Mary of the 21st century. This could be said to be the best era in the West. At the same time, the people of China were still working hard to create a better life, but the people of London could already sit down and enjoy the legacy of the British Empire, and the preferential treatment and benefits that the Soviet people had fought for with their blood and lives. 50 years before them, before the Second World War, the greedy capitalists monopolized the majority of the benefits of the colonial world. They even wanted to take away the last penny of the workers and the lower class. After them, the financial crisis and the wave of refugees impacted the values of multiculturalism. The common values established by the Western civilization were on the verge of collapse. This was the best era in the United Kingdom. On a common cloudy day in London, Chen Ong held a black umbrella and walked in the mist. He stretched out his hand to hail a taxi. The taxi stopped on the right side of Chen Ong. He closed the umbrella and got into the car. In English with a slight foreign accent, he said, "To London's Westminster, Charing Cross Road." The driver was not surprised by Chen Eng's Asian face. He did not do the stupid things that the British did 60 years ago. In the mummy world, the Londoners who had strong colonialist sentiments at that time had made an incorrect statement about Chen Ong. What happened next was very natural. After Imogen resurrected, he almost massacred the entire London. It was hard to say what role Chen Ong played in it. Charing Cross Road was famous for its antique shops and ancient bookstores. It was a popular place for British tourists. Of course, for Chen Ong, it was more famous for the Leaky Cauldron Bar on this street. It was the entrance to the most famous street in the British magic world, Diagon Alley. It was located behind the brick wall in the backyard of the Leaky Cauldron. When Chen Ong walked into this shabby bar, the owner of the bar was a bald and toothless old man named Tom. Fortunately, he had the same name as the famous Voldemort in the magic world, although he might not think so. Tom sat behind the bar, wiping glasses. When he saw Chen Ong come in, he stared at him with his definitely not friendly eyes. "You're a new face." Chen Ong knew that the world of magic in England was a closed system. As the gatekeeper of Diagon Alley, Chen Ong probably knew everyone. An Asian face like Chen Ong was naturally very eye-catching. Besides, he was assigned to this place. Chen Ong did not believe that he did not have other tasks, such as keeping an eye on strangers entering and leaving Diagon Alley. With a friendly smile, Chen Ong whispered, "Perhaps it's because I'm a foreigner." "Ha ha." The bar owner, Tom, laughed out loud. "Yes. Wizards from other countries come to Britain to have a look at Diagon Alley. However, most of them are from Europe. As for the wizards from the East, I haven't seen them in a while." "Well then," said Tom, looking up, "does the stranger know how to open the door?" And Chen Ong thought for a while and pretended to be a normal person. Above the bin, counting 3 pieces upwards, and then 2 horizontally? After bidding farewell to Tom, who no longer had any objections, Chen Ong glanced at the bar's dining hall. There were a few wizards sitting there reading today's Transmigration magazine. In the corner there was a witch who ate raw liver. Her face was greasy, and her teeth were sharp. There was also a wizard who looked crazy, laughing maniacally. From the looks of it, the world of magic was not a place for good people. Wizards were not ordinary people who knew magic. In fact, in the eyes of Muggles, most of them were crazy and eccentric. However, Chen Ong did not care, because they were not as crazy as he was. What was a witch who ate raw liver? When Chen Ong was doing human experiments, he would take time out to perform experiments while cutting. In the eyes of others, he was probably even more crazy. "This place makes me feel like a fish in water. There's a sense of familiarity." Chen Ong chuckled. He used the black umbrella to tap on one of the bricks 3 times. Although he did not have a magic wand, as an 8-elemental Grand Arcanist, even if it was an unfamiliar magic system, it was still a piece of cake for him to trigger a magic trigger. As the brick wall trembled and moved, a small hole began to appear in that place, and then it grew bigger and bigger. In front of Chen Ong, a dark archway appeared, and the archway led to a small cobblestone street. As Chen Ong stepped into the opposite alley, the archway gradually disappeared behind him, and he began to hear the smell of the marketplace. This was a simple street, and the shops on both sides of the street had the style of a few centuries ago. There were people selling crucibles, magic potions, food, and wizards coming and going. It was very lively. Chen Ong was going to buy some things here in preparation for his next plan. But first he had to go to the fairies' bank, Gringotts, and exchange pounds for some gold coins. Gringotts was located in the middle of the opposite alley, near the intersection with Knockback Alley. It was a tall white marble building. From the front of the bronze gate and up the white marble stairs, one could see the famous poem on the silver gate, "Please enter, stranger, but beware, what is the outcome of insatiable greed, blindly demanding, reaping without sowing, will receive the most severe punishment. Therefore, if you want to take from our underground vault a fortune that never belonged to you, thief, you have been warned, beware that it is not treasure, but evil retribution." The magic of the fairy. Chen Ong read these words that were enchanted with mysterious magic, feeling the extraordinary power contained within. These few simple lines of poetry were much more sophisticated than the magic at the entrance of the opposite alley. Chen Ong could read the complex magic aura within. There are traces of the school of prophecy. The power of fate, the magic of curses. This is the most secretive curse of fate. Borrowing the power of the contract, anyone who enters from this door will sign a contract with Gringotts. Anyone who tries to take away treasures that don't belong to them will receive evil retribution. The curse of retribution here is more complicated. On one hand, there are traces of prophecy magic, which can allow the fairy to divine the cursed. Apart from that, there are also some curses and misfortune that will be cast on the cursed. But the most complicated part is the power of fate behind these curses. Chen Ong carefully dissected that trace of magic aura. With a wave of his hand, he stopped the curse from extracting his real name. It wasn't that Chen Ong wanted to steal anything from Gringotts, but he didn't want to cause any trouble. If he allowed this curse to extract his real name, Chen Ong was confident that it wouldn't succeed. But that would trigger some alarms that Chen Ong didn't want to see. If it succeeded, then that would be a huge problem. In mysticism, a person's name was magical, it was the brand of a life's existence. And Chen Eng's name contained unimaginable danger. This was a terrifying concept that spanned across countless universes. Chapter 754. Perhaps Chen Ong had been reading this text for a long time, and it attracted the attention of the goblin guards at the door. These goblins looked a bit like the goblins and goblins commonly seen in the Western fantasy world. Their light green skin and short stature, as well as their greedy nature for wealth, all reminded people of this fantasy race. But the goblins in Harry Potter's world were a different kind of creature. They were not even considered intelligent life forms, but a kind of magical creature. They were as common as the rats in the Muggle world, and often appeared in the back gardens of wizards. They looked like bearded dwarves, but they were annoying creatures with low intelligence. The twins of the Weasley family often experimented on goblins. In Chen Eng's eyes, they had a trace of the elegance of people of his generation. Chen Ong brushed away the spell at the entrance of Gringotts and walked through the silver door. Inside was a tall marble hall. About 100 or so goblins sat on a row of high stools behind a long counter. The layout was like a 17th-century bank. Those goblins didn't even raise their heads when they saw Chen Ong walk in. They focused on their work. Some of them used scales to check the weight and quality of gold coins, some used eyepieces to check gems, and some recorded accounts. The value of gold coins was very high. One gold coin was about £5, and the contract was 50 RMB. Moreover, gold coins were not pure gold. Even in 1990, £5 could not be exchanged for 2 grams of gold. If gold coins were pure gold, there would be an absurd result. The value of gold coins was even higher than its value. Even if the financial system of the goblins was rough and backward, they would not be so stupid. For Chen Ong, although pounds were like paper, he could have as much as he wanted. However, Gringotts Bank also had restrictions on large exchange. Therefore, Chen Ong only exchanged 2,000 gold coins in total, which was barely enough for his expenses. The prices in the world of magic were not high. In Lihan Bookstore, Chen Ong picked up some teaching materials and books, as well as some old books at a low price. It only cost him a few hundred gold coins. Chen Ong flipped through the books and found that, just as he had expected, in the books of the Magi, even in the books about the core spells and spells of the magic system, the knowledge related to magic was extremely incomplete and obscure. The arcana system that Chen Ong learned was complete, logical, and rational. Even the magic system for mages that was reorganized after the fall of the ancient arcana civilization was much more brilliant than the spell books that were full of chaos, ambiguity, and lack of a system. Most of the magic books in this world were really just spell books. They only taught you how to wave a wand and cast a spell. There were detailed explanations on how to hold a wand and how to pronounce an incantation. However, there were very few explanations on the nature of the incantation. Some of the descriptions were vague and weird, like the inarticulate ravings of a crazy old witch. This was closer to the image of most of the Magi that Chen Ong had seen. What made Lucien confused was whether these magic books that looked clear but were actually a mess of internal logic had educated the wizards in the world of magic like this, or whether these wizards could only write magic books like this. In the extremely rare alchemy books and potion books written by Dumbledore and Nico Lemaire, Chen Ong did find some knowledge related to the nature of magic. However, these things were not the understanding of the whole world, the universe, and the planes, nor the analysis of the laws of energy and the laws of the world, nor was it a rational language full of mathematical formulas. Instead, it was a set of things operated by empirical technology and mystical philosophy. It used a lot of symbols and visions, described in emotional, vague language, and based on personal experience. It looked like something useful, but in fact, it was a hybrid product of the set of rules and philosophy and symbolism in the medieval alchemy book. It could not be said that they did not have exquisite and in-depth research, but it was full of idealism, emotional and personal feelings, rather than scientific, rational, and based on a set of orderly research rules. Chen Ong commented, "The research of the wizards in the world of magic is a hybrid of Western mystical idealism and Eastern empirical technology. They don't study mathematics." Chen Ong closed the magic book and sighed. What else can they study? No wonder Dumbledore won the Merlin medal. It was because he discovered 12 new applications of dragon blood. The wizards in the world of magic are a group of people who rely on experience and intuition to master the application of their magic instincts. They don't have science, and they don't even have rationality. Most wizards don't even know how to do the 4 operations. They don't learn, either. Their learning is to imitate and wave their wands, imitate the pronunciation of incantations, and then practice again and again to become proficient. Their potions are constantly fumbling according to vague medicinal properties, and a set of potion formulas summed up by luck and experience. It's 70% like China's ancient medicine, but even worse than ancient medicine is that from the beginning, Chinese medicine has a dialectic, and they don't even have the dialectic of yin and yang. They're more like the witch doctors of Wuyue and Chu. In essence, that group of wizards is no different from chimpanzees who can learn to use tools. The only difference is that chimpanzees use their natural hands and constantly try to summarize the experience of using tools, while wizards rely on their natural magic power and constantly try to use the experience of magic power, and finally summarize the current magic system. They have skills but can't use them. Like a craftsman, they can occasionally invent some new things because of their rich experience, and even extremely delicate inventions, but they don't understand the unseen world at all, the laws of nature at work behind the scenes. However, not only did Chen Ang's doubts not solve, but there were also many untested conjectures. There was a certain element of chance in an individual's personality and behavior, but if the sample was expanded to a group, even if it was due to the cultural factors of the group, it would eventually lead to inevitability. For example, the wizards of the magical world and the muggles of the normal world, Two groups that were physically close at hand and had no objective obstacles in the exchange of information actually became two groups that were almost completely cut off from each other in reality. This was simply impossible and unscientific. In theory, as long as a wizard wanted to understand the Muggles, they could easily obtain a large amount of information about the Muggles and reap great benefits from it. When they knew that their magic could bring them a large amount of gold coins, they could take control of the Muggles' large enterprises, and the Auras, who were only a few hundred strong, could not stop them in time. It was completely inconceivable for such an extraordinary world to be separated from the mortal world. If this was just an individual, there would be many chance factors that restrain them from participating in the interests of the Muggles' world. But if this sample was expanded to a group of thousands of people, there was no chance at all. It was simply inevitable that there would be such a person who tried to come into contact with the Muggles. And the wizards who were deeply involved in the Muggles' world would have a great impact on the Sorcerer's world. Then the Sorcerer's world should not be like this today. At least the fairies of Gringotts would improve their financial system with great enthusiasm. But they did not. So Chun-Ong had a reasonable conjecture. Perhaps wizards can't understand rational, objective science at all. Just like dyslexia, wizards are a group that collectively suffers from rational understanding disorder. They are born with magic and can use magic. Does this deprive them of the ability to understand science? This is very magical. This needs to be tested experimentally to see if wizards can't understand science and its spirit. Are they unable to learn mathematics, unable to understand the whole set of internal logic of science? Do they have an understanding disorder? If that's the case, Chun-Ong smiled and said, then everything can be explained clearly. The wizard's bloodline, or magic, deprives them of some of their ability to understand, causing them to have a cognitive distortion of the Muggles that science has penetrated into all aspects of life. While their natural magic gives them magical powers, it also makes them mentally handicapped, causing the two groups of wizards and Muggles to be so completely separated. They live in isolation in order to protect themselves. Chapter 755. Under the strange gaze of the manager of Lihan Bookstore, Chun-Ong piled up the books he wanted to buy into a big pile. The pile was about half the height of Chun-Ang's waist. Not only was there the Hogwarts textbook, Standard Spells, but there was also the book 100 Spells to Help You Manage Your Home, which was usually read by housewives. Of course, Chun-Ong would not tell him that it was easier to decipher the essence of magic if the effects were the same and repeated. Chun-Ong used the umbrella to point at the struggling monster's book of monsters. The book that was trying to bite something immediately went limp. The eyes on the cover that mimicked the eight-eyed spider suddenly lost their light, and the whole book seemed to be dead. The manager watched in surprise as Chun-Ong opened the empty glass cover and put the invisible book of invisibility under his armpit. He then went to the shelf next to him and took a book called Forgotten Ancient Spells and Spells. The books that were enchanted with strange spells were either useless under Chun-Ang's hands, or the spells were simply broken. Just before Chun-Ong paid the bill, the manager calculated for a while and calculated the price of the book. Sir, the total is 1,380 gold coins and 23 silver coins. When Chun-Ong took out his wallet, the manager asked him with embarrassment, Sir, I have a presumptuous request. Those enchanted books brought us a lot of trouble. I saw that you subdued them very easily, especially the Monsters' Book of Monsters. Very few people buy this book, and the bookstore only has one copy. It is very tenacious. What spell did you use to subdue it? If you are willing to tell us, we are willing to waive the change for you. Subdue? Chun-Ong raised his head and replied with interest, No, I didn't subdue it. I killed it. This is a spell that can destroy the artificial intelligence of magical items. In the hands of some of the more dangerous dark magi, it can also be used to destroy a person's consciousness. At this point, the manager's face was already turning purple. Chun-Ong continued, That's right, it's the soul snatch curse. The manager's face turned pale. His forehead began to sweat, and his whole body trembled. Your bookstore only has one monster book? Then you should get more stock, because it's going to be a big seller soon. Although there was still a year until Hagrid became a professor for the protection of magical creatures, it was already a relatively short period for the spending power of magic. That was why Chen-Ong wasn't lying when he said that it would be soon. However, the manager was no longer in the mood to listen to what he said. His whole body was trembling, almost begging, wanting to send Chen-Ong away. Chen-Ong didn't seem to understand his hint and continued to comment. The enchantment on the Monster Book of Monsters is completely due to the author's bad taste and weird interests. It can be seen that he is a wizard who appreciates fierce and magical animals, so he added a fierce transformation spell to his book. Other than attracting wizards who have the same weird taste as him, such as Hagrid, it will only bring trouble to the readers. That's why I destroyed it without any hesitation. Other spell books that have been enchanted are different. The invisibility spell on the Invisibility Book of Invisibility is actually a vivid demonstration of the contents of the book. There are 28 invisibility spells on different pages, which vividly demonstrates the evolution of invisibility from ancient times to the present and the origin of each variant. It can be said that it is necessary. The only problem is that the wizard who can break the invisibility spell on the Invisibility Book of Invisibility must have a deep understanding of invisibility. This creates an interesting contradiction. Those who can read this book have already learned the invisibility spell, and those who can't understand it at all. The manager awkwardly wiped the sweat on his forehead and bent down to help Chen-Ong pack the book. There's no need. Chen-Ong faintly refused. He gently waved the umbrella in his hand that was used as a cane, and the spell book under it was transformed into a blue floral cloth that was big enough to cover the pile of books. The blue cloth automatically wrapped the books up, and the corners of the cloth flew up and made a beautiful knot. Then, the big bag that was half the height of a person shrunk to the size of Chen-Ang's palm, and was put into his arms by Chen-Ong Traceless Stretch spell. The bookstore manager clenched his fist again. There was no doubt that this was Chen-Ong trampling on the law made by the Ministry of Magic without batting an eyelid. Previously, he cast the unforgivable spell. Although it was a variant of the spell used on magic items, it still broke the law. The only difference was that he would be sent to Azkaban or fined. The Traceless Stretch spell was a high-level spell, but it was strictly controlled because of the possibility of abuse. In theory, 100 wizards who were proficient in this spell could squeeze into a small toilet cubicle, and the possibility of violating the International Wizard Confidentiality Law was obvious. Therefore, the Ministry of Magic set a strict rule for this spell. The Traceless Stretch spell could not be used for personal use, but could only be used for the production of specific items that were approved by the relevant Ministry of Magic, such as school luggage and family tents. But what could the bookstore manager do to Chen-Ong, who could modify the unforgivable spell, and was undoubtedly a master of dark magic? Knowing that he was just an ordinary wizard, the manager did not have the slightest intention of reporting Chen-Ong. In order to uphold the law of the Ministry of Magic, he would offend the most terrifying master of dark magic? He was not that crazy. The world of magic had never been a place full of fairness and justice. On the contrary, although wizards and muggles lived in almost two separate worlds, they still had a lot of common experience in bureaucratic incompetence. For a long time, the Ministry of Magic had been a dog raised by the large pureblood sorcerer families. Due to the rise of the Muggle bloodline sorcerers and the impact of the small pureblood sorcerer families, the interests and status of the large pureblood sorcerer families could not be suppressed. So much so that they turned to support trash like Voldemort to clean up the Muggle bloodline sorcerers who were fighting with them for power in the magic world. But because the person they supported was so incompetent, they were liquidated and their power was greatly reduced. However, the pure-blooded magi still had a deep-rooted influence. With special privileges and the power of the gold coins, they protected the dark magi and allowed them to move freely under the watchful eyes of the Ministry of Magic. Although they were no longer as unbridled as they were in the past, the traditions still continued. Wasn't the car parked on a side street of Diagon Alley in an open and above-board manner? Chapter 756. After leaving the bookstore, Chen Ong visited a magic potion material store called Slager and Giggs Pharmacy. As soon as he entered the door, he smelled the stench of rotten eggs mixed with decomposing biological tissues. Chen Ong had no choice but to cast an air freshener spell on himself. This was a life spell that he had just learned. Chen Ong imitated it with arcane magic, and it looked pretty good. Glancing at the wooden barrels piled up on the ground, Lucien saw toad livers, eel eyes, bat feces and other viscous things in them. The cabinets on the wall were filled with glass bottles filled with various powders and herbs. There were also dried animal tissues, claws, feathers and poisonous fangs. There were also some dark tissues of unknown animals. They looked like balls of grease that were strung together on a dirty rope. The whole scene looked a bit like the witchcraft material market in Africa. Chen Ong should be glad that there were not skulls of men and women, organs of Muggle children, withered human hands, rotten brains, and other necromancy materials. However, Chen Ong knew that there must be such things in Knockout Alley. Perhaps this was the reason why the Ministry of Magic allowed it to exist. After all, although a lot of black magic was theoretically illegal, it was almost an open practice for wizards to practice it secretly. Wizards who did not learn such magic were going against the tradition of wizards. Most wizards were like the Texans in America, loyal supporters of gun rights. Every pure-blood family viewed the black magic passed down in their family as their lifeblood. Of course, the shame of the pure-blood, Weasley, was an exception. Although the materials here were complete, what Chen Ong wanted to buy the most was live magical animals, not tissues, organs, and specimens. There was nothing here. Living magical animals could probably only be bought in pet shops and the black market. As for whether to buy some from a pet shop, Chen Ong felt that it would be better to go to the black market. What Chen Ong wanted the most were magical animals that could be dissected and studied, full of vitality and fresh magic power, and were always active. He did not want these withered, rotten, and lifeless magic materials. However, he still bought some. He was going to repeat the potion experiments and use the same formula to research something. Although the magic books in Lihan Bookstore were comprehensive, some books about black magic and ancient magic forbidden by the Ministry of Magic were not sold at all. They were either handwritten copies or early editions published before the Ministry of Magic's relevant laws were perfected. Now they were all in the study rooms of the major pure-blood families and the forbidden books area of Hogwarts. Among the potion formulas, although there were books related to the blessing potion and compound potion, there were no clear formulas. Other common potion formulas were clear, but there was no systematic pharmacological analysis and dialectic. It seemed that the only way for wizards to study potions was to try and discover something by relying on their experience. After Chen Ong came out of the pharmacy, his originally bulging wallet had dried up. The gold coins he exchanged was a little lacking for his huge shopping plan, but Chen Ong did not plan to exchange anymore. The two most important materials, books and potion materials, were already in place. He did not plan to buy the outdated equipment in the magic world, such as crucibles. He did not need folding, enchanted, or automatic stirring equipment. Biochemical modulation equipment and related scientific instruments were what he wanted. As for Ollivander's wand shop, although Chen Ong did need a wand, he was more willing to make one himself. He wanted to combine the wand-making knowledge of this world with the relevant arcane knowledge of Phelan. For an existence like Chen Ong, Ollivander's wand was too shallow. If he tried, he would find that every wand was suitable, but not all seemed suitable. Chen Ong did not need a wand to adapt to him. He could control any magic item, so he only needed to make a suitable wand himself. Now, Chen Ong only needed to find a place to stay. He returned to the central part of Diagon Alley where Gringotts was located. There was a dark alley there, leading to the famous gathering place of dark magic materials, Knockout Alley. Although people had always compared Knockout Alley and Diagon Alley, as though they were two streets that could stand side by side, in fact, Diagon Alley was the largest gathering place for wizards in London. It was a huge market with all kinds of shops. On the other hand, Knockout Alley was just a secluded corner of Diagon Alley. There were many illegal dark magic material shops gathered here. In fact, it was very secluded and narrow. The reason why Chen Ong came here was because it was secluded enough. The alley was dark and narrow. The dark magic shops on both sides were also dim and secluded. There was an old and ugly witch peeking at him from behind the counter. Her smile revealed her specially sharpened teeth. Chen Ong only needed one look to know that these teeth came from many different people. It seemed like this witch was the same as President Washington, having the hobby of pulling out other people's teeth and putting them in her own gums. Of course, President Washington also liked strong black maids. When he pulled out the black people's teeth, there might not even be black people's toothpaste. So, Chen Ong nimbly lifted his umbrella. Although it was really just an umbrella, at least it made people think that he still needed a wand. This was to cover up the fact that this Grand Arcanist did not need a wand, nor did he need to perform surgery. Exorcism. This was a level 4 necromancy spell, but it was slightly modified by Chen Ong. He added some black magic. Then, Chen Ong saw the witch covering her mouth in horror. Her false teeth had already taken root in her gums. A large number of bony roots were trying to drill into her jaw. The witch fell to the ground in pain. She could not even scream. She could only make some hissing sounds. There really are teeth pulled out from the mouths of people who died a violent death. Then let's enjoy their resentment. It's not that easy to get a gift from the dead. Chen Ong sneered and continued to walk forward. A few wizards who were peeking from the side quickly retreated into their houses. Chen Ong easily gained respect on this dangerous street. He came to shop 13B. This shop was bigger than any dark magic shop in Knockout Alley. Of course, it was also dark and messy. Chen Ong, who no longer had any expectations for the quality of service in the magic world, walked into this dark magic shop with his head down. It looked like a traditional grocery store in China in the 19th century. There were all kinds of masks hanging on the wall. The obvious traces of curses and dark magic made Chen Ong feel that he could not ignore them. There was no one in the shop. The shop owner seemed to be very confident in the security of this place. He placed his goods here so easily. Some yellow wooden prosthetic eyes were soaked in glass bottles. When Chen Ong walked forward, the eyeballs quickly turned around. The densely packed eyes were staring at him. There were also all kinds of skulls. Chen Ong could tell that they belonged to different races and genders. The skulls that had been chopped off were placed on the counter. Chen Ong could tell that some of the materials were taken from the dead, while others were taken from the living. Of course, after they were taken off, they were definitely dead. Chapter 757. Chen Ong immediately noticed the large black cabinet next to the shelf. He could keenly read the spell cast on it. The vanishing cabinet that leads to Hogwarts? It almost caused big trouble. Chen Ong glanced coldly at the cabinet. It was a major loophole in Hogwarts' defense system, but Chen Ong did not know if it was deliberately arranged by Dumbledore. That old rabbit schemes ran deep, not someone to be trifled with. The vanishing cabinet was also an important reason why Chen Ong chose to start with Karaktaku's Bork. Bork was also a very well-connected person. This could be seen from the fact that Voldemort Tom Riddle had turned down a job in the Ministry of Magic and chose to work under Chen Ong as a shop assistant. Now, another Dark Devil, and possibly the most dangerous Dark Devil in history, had his eyes on Chen Ong. Chen Ang's eyes swept past the vanishing cabinet and fell on the shelf behind it. There were rolls of long ropes used by torturers, and a beautiful opal necklace was displayed in front of it. Chen Ong could feel the curse and resentment entwined around the necklace. He was very clear about the dark little secret of the black magic equipment business. Wizards would cast evil curses on beautiful and precious jewels, then sell them to muggles. When the evil curse on the jewels killed generation after generation of their owners, a merchant like Mr. Bork would take it away, and then it would become a precious product in the black magic shop. "Sir, do you like it?" A greasy voice came from behind Chen Ong. A middle-aged man with oily hair walked out of the room and said to Chen Ong. He was Bork. Like many wizards, he had a pair of chilling eyes and a strange and gloomy aura. "It's a good thing. This is opal from the Mediterranean islands. As you know, the production is very small. Muggles believe that people who are not born in October will bring misfortune if they have opal. But that's actually just a curse cast by wizards. The discoloration of opal, the curse of misfortune and the misfortune of muggles, will bring magical power to this necklace." "Jewel of misfortune?" Chen Ong nodded. "Yes, that's what the muggles call these cursed jewels." Buojin grinned, revealing his yellow teeth. "So far, 19 muggles have lost their lives in possession of this item. This is truly an extraordinary item. It's very useful in black magic rituals. The Ministry of Magic forbids the blood sacrifice of muggles, so this kind of bad luck substitute that entangles the pain and resentment of the dead has become popular. Right?" Chen Ong asked in return. He stretched out his hand to touch it, but Buojin quickly stopped him. "Don't touch it, the curse on it is not normal." However, Chen Ong did not touch the string of opals. Instead, he picked up the long rope behind it. There was still a noose on the long rope used for hanging. A long rope used for hanging. There should be no less than 100 people executed on it. These are all good things. Chen Ong threw the long rope down and calmly wiped his hand. "But for me, it's not good enough." Hearing this, Buojin's smile became even more radiant. He pretended to be reserved and said, "Really good things. Sir, really good things are also worth a good price. My Buojin Bork Black Magic Shop is the most famous shop in Knockout Alley, and also has the most complete collection of magic items. If I don't have the real good things here, then the whole magic world can't possibly have them." "What do you want, sir?" "These are substitutes. I want what they can replace," Chen Ong said calmly. Buojin's expression suddenly changed. He hesitated and stammered, That kind of thing is illegal. That kind of thing is illegal. How can I have it here? I am a proper businessman. And I don't even know who you are, sir. If I have the approval from the Ministry of Magic." Chen Ong seemed to have given up. He changed the topic and asked, "Can you get me living magical animals? Like centaurs, mermaids, 5-legged monsters, poisonous leopards, and even fire dragons. Substitutes are also divided into different grades, right?" "No, sir, we don't have those things." Buojin's expression had completely changed. The oily smile on his face disappeared without a trace, replaced by a look of irritation and anger. He began to impatiently chase the customers away. He waved his greasy hands and scolded Chen Ong, "Go! Sir, you are not welcome here. Do you think I'm an aura from the Ministry of Magic?" Chen Ong laughed in a low voice. "But I already know what I want." Through the psionic field, Chen Ong, who had peeked into Buojin's mind, confirmed that Buojin was his target. He calmly stood at the back, waiting for Buojin to come out from behind the counter to chase him away. But when Buojin walked in front of Chen Ong, the deadly long noose drilled out from behind like a cobra and wrapped around Buojin's thick neck. The noose immediately tightened, and the thick noose easily hung Buojin in the air. The resentment of the undead entwined in the noose began to whisper in Buojin's ear. The resentment of the undead, the suffocating pain, and the cold, cruel will of Chen Ong made it impossible for Buojin to even take out his wand. Chen Ong gently tapped the noose, and the end of the noose drilled into Bujin's clothes like a nimble snake, pulling out his wand. Chen-Ong held the 10¼ wand in his palm and observed it. He commented, "Black thorn plum, dragonheart cord. Black thorn plum is the most suitable material for choosing a warrior. If its owner can control black magic, then the power it can display will be astonishing. A wand made of this material needs to go through difficulties with its owner before it can truly integrate with you. At that time, it will become your most loyal servant. But let me tell you, there is no loyalty in this world in the face of power." Chen-Ong raised the wand and coldly said to Bujin, "Heart drill, bone gouge." Bujin howled in pain. Chen-Ong did not stop his voice from spreading. "I heard that Tom Riddle used to be a shop assistant here?" Chen-Ong asked in a low voice. "Many people fear him, but not because of his power, but because of his madness. Voldemort is not strong enough. He only uses things that make people weak, such as love and concern. Bujin, you should be fearless. Because you don't have anyone you love, you don't have to be afraid that I will be like Voldemort, placing the bodies of your family and concern in front of you. I think you are actually proud of yourself in front of Voldemort, because you can tell him that I am not afraid of you. All your tricks are no threat to me, because we are both dark wizards. I hope you can say the same to me next." Chapter 758. Mr. Bujin Bork raised his head pitifully. Those who knew him had never seen him so humble. Even when he was facing Voldemort, Voldemort would say to him, "Come on, my good brother." But this time, he was almost begging. Bujin's sweaty body twitched as he begged Chen-Ong, "I'll give you anything you want, as long as I have it. Please tell me. No, don't torture me anymore. Heart drilling and bone gouging. Nerves sharp. Willpower clear. 5 senses sealed. Again. Heart drilling and bone gouging." "No," Bujin wailed. Chen-Ong's curse had made his nerves extremely sensitive. Even the faintest breeze that blew past his skin was like a steel brush. It was full of numbness, itchiness, swelling, and pain. There was no doubt that Chen-Ong had improved the heart-drilling curse to make it more destructive to nerves as hard as steel. "Bujin. Bilbo Baggins, can I call you that?" Chen-Ong said playfully. Bujin didn't understand the meaning behind Chen-Ang's words, but being tortured by Chen-Ong for no reason had already destroyed the bottom line in his heart. Even the craziest dark magus wouldn't torture someone for no reason. He thought that Chen-Ong had a request, which would form a bottom line in his heart so that he would know what he was persevering for. There would always be a result, no matter whether he was firm or weak. But Chen-Ong did not. He did not say anything and experimented with the improved curse on him, as if his intention was to torture him for fun. Bujin admitted defeat. He only wanted to know what Chen-Ong wanted, so that he would have a reason to persevere. "No, you haven't lost yet," Chen-Ong said calmly as he looked at him. "Bujin, I have a question, and I want to find the answer from you." Chen-Ong sat next to Bujin's noose and said slowly, "We all know why Voldemort became the Dark Devil. Although there aren't many dark magi as powerful as him, there are still quite a few. He isn't the strongest, nor is he the most knowledgeable. Even you, Caractacus Bork, have areas where you surpass him. He admires bloodlines, but he himself is a muggle bastard. He thinks he is strong, but foolishly placed his soul in a soul vessel. A person who does such a stupid thing is not the most outstanding. There are many people in this world who are stronger than him, such as Dumbledore, Nicolim, Grindelwald, and even you, Bujin Bork. But he is the only one who became the most dangerous dark wizard in history, and the wizards here do not even dare to say his name. We know the answer very well. It's because he has no attachments, because he doesn't have love. He doesn't have the weaknesses of mortals and wizards. Even though he has many followers, in his mind, they are worthless. They are just tools for him to achieve his own interests. When those wizards realized that opposing Voldemort would result in the cruel torture of their family and children, they did not even dare to resist when that invisible terror descended on them. Only a few people, those who have no weaknesses and no attachments, can fight against him. Either their family has died in the hands of Voldemort, or they have a strong will and perseverance, using their powerful strength and firm belief to protect their loved ones. Dumbledore. Boijin raised his head in horror. Yes, the greatest light wizard, the headmaster of Hogwarts. Dumbledore is such a person. Voldemort does not care about anything, but Dumbledore can sacrifice everything for the greater good. They are the same kind of people that Voldemort cannot defeat. Qianong said softly, Boijin, you are also such a person. I do not care about the people that Voldemort enslaved and brought fear to them, because if they can submit once, they can kneel a second time. My question is there anything that can defeat people like you? Defeat Dumbledore, defeat Voldemort, make them fear, and make them submit? Qianong calmly looked into Boijin's eyes and asked, Can you give me this answer? Boijin trembled as he said in a trembling voice, This is impossible. Take your time, Mr. Boijin. I am not in a hurry. Now I need to settle down and use your place to prepare for some experiments. Qianong slowly stood up and said, As for your experiments, I am very patient. After saying that, he waved Boijin's wand and turned him into an owl. Boijin was horrified to feel that he could no longer control his body. A virtual owl's consciousness was controlling his body in place of him. Most of the time, he could freely control himself, but if Qianong needed, he could take over the transformed owl at any time. What is your real name? Qianong suddenly frowned and said, Let me think. Caractacus Bork? A person's real name was magical. The most powerful prophecy spell that Qianong had mastered was one of the most powerful legendary spells of the School of Prophecy. He could use a person's real name as a coordinate to inherit all the causes and effects that made up his existence. As Qianong's wand flickered, all the external relationships that made up Boijin's existence were entrusted to the real name, Caractacus Bork. Qianong picked out the relevant causes and effects of Boijin and stripped them along with his name. At this time, Boijin saw a figure appear on the other side of the glass door through the reflection. He excitedly flapped his wings, thinking that Qianong would dodge, but he didn't expect him to just stand there without any disguise. The door was pushed open, and an old and ugly witch who looked like a shriveled orange peel appeared at the door. She was holding a tray filled with human fingernails. The witch stood at the door. When she saw Qianong, she grinned, revealing her green teeth, and said, Mr. Boijin, I heard an unusual sound from outside. It's great to see that you're all right. Mr. Boijin? Boijin, who had turned into an owl, couldn't help but struggle more violently when he saw the witch call Qianong. Qianong had no intention of stopping him, but the witch noticed the owl. She covered her mouth in surprise and said, Someone is here to deliver a letter to you. That howling letter wasn't soft at all. Boijin wanted to rush forward to check if she was under a spell of confusion. Otherwise, how could she have mistaken Qianong for himself without any doubt? I'm closing the door. Get out of here, Qianong ordered. Boijin thought that the witch would have realized something was wrong, but the witch naturally understood what Qianong meant. She bowed her head and left Boijin's black magic shop. Qianong raised his hand and cast a warning spell on the shop. He then dragged Boijin's transformed owl into the back room with one hand. It wasn't easy to get a sample. He had to clear up the previous problem first. Qianong's curiosity about the wizard's bloodline had to be explained. He started preparing the surgical instruments and turned Boijin back into his human form. Chapter 759. As a famous black market tycoon, Boijin had several properties under his name, as well as various businesses that were under his control. When these were all replaced by Qianong's true name magic, he no longer lacked the manpower and resources to conduct his experiment. Bujin, who had turned into an owl, could only watch as Chen Ong used his shop, controlled his businesses, used his connections, and even spent his money. Even those properties that had been cursed with the undying loyalty curse naturally opened their doors to their owner. This was because in any judgment, Chen Ong, who had taken away Bujin's true name, was Bujin himself. In fact, he was even more similar to Bujin than Bujin. Bujin could see with his own eyes how magic had taken away everything from him. In the beginning, Bujin thought that Chen Ong had only used a powerful confusion curse to make everyone think that he was Bujin. But later on, he saw with his own eyes how Chen Ong easily took out his family's treasured magic books and related inheritances. He even boldly entered Gringotts Bujin's treasury and took out his money. Bujin almost went crazy. "You can't do this," Bujin begged. "Leave something for me." This was the most futile struggle he had when he saw Chen Ong pass the curse test and take out the Bork family's inherited dark magic book. One had to know that the Bork family had intermarried with the Blake family. His grandfather had married the Blake headmaster's daughter, Belvina. Because of this, the Bork family had obtained a portion of the Blake family's inherited dark magic book. However, these things needed to pass the Blake family's bloodline test before they could be opened to Magi. But now, Chen Ong was holding a shadowy magic book and reading it. This was the Blake family's book on the 3 unforgivable curses. It looked like a dense shadow, but in fact, Chen Ong had found it in the shadow of the fireplace in the Bork family's old mansion. How could the shadow read it? Bujin did not know that, in fact, he could only read it when the first ray of sunlight shone on the shadow with his Blake bloodline. But now, it was flipping around freely in Chen Eng's hand, like a burning whore who couldn't wait to dance around the thief's hand. "Something of yours?" Chen Ong looked up from the magic book and smiled. "What's something of yours? This is mine. You are a nameless person. Remember, what you have now is just an illusory memory. Except for the memory that belongs to Bujin Bok, which is also my memory, you have nothing. You are a new person. Or an owl. Does it depend on what I want to turn you into? My modified baleful polymorph combines the profoundness of arcana polymorph, the naturalness and harmony of ancient druid polymorph, and the convenience and fun of wizard polymorph. It's a permanent baleful polymorph. The key lies in permanent and malice. Permanent means that if I don't cast a spell to remove it, you will never recover, and only I can remove this spell. And the meaning of malice is that I can take the initiative, depending on whether I have good or bad intentions, to let the transfiguration magic manifest on your body. In other words, if I want to, I can give you the brain of an owl, and hope that it can contain your shallow and poor consciousness. Of course, if I take away your memory, you will have nothing. The name Bujin Bok will have nothing to do with you, and you will become a completely new person or something else. If I turn you into a male dog, you will have to pray for a miracle, so that you won't have any urges for a small furry animal. Bujin was trembling. It was a funny thing for an owl to do. He opened his mouth and let out a mournful howl. Chen Ong raised his wand and cast a baleful polymorph on him. Then Bujin couldn't control his appetite for the small animals in the shadows. He flapped his wings and flew towards the squirming mouse in the dark house. After Chen Ong turned a few more pages of the book, Bujin flew back. The owl's face had a lifelike expression of despair. Chen Ong glanced at him and casually turned him back to human form. After Bujin returned to his original form, he reflexively felt nauseous. He wanted to vomit, but the feeling of the fur in his stomach made his hair stand on end. I remember wizards didn't care about these things. You would eat raw frog livers, swallow a half-grown poisonous toad alive, chew a dead mouse, or even a rotten one. Why do you have such a physical revulsion? Chen Ong asked with interest. He closed the book of shadow magic. Bujin crawled forward, like a disheveled house elf. He placed Chen Eng's foot on top of his head and said in a trembling voice, "My master." Chen Ong smiled coldly and touched his heart with his wand. Boijin immediately felt a twisting pain in his body. His body began to twist and shrink until he looked like a bag of bones. His head, however, did not change. It looked comically large and small. His greasy hair began to fall out. His nose became long and sharp, his ears drooped like a pig's. His face became wrinkled and wrinkled. He was naked and bony, with a pair of bulging eyes the size of tennis balls. Bogan felt his new body, and then screamed like a fairy. He knew what he had become, a house elf. He looked at Chen Ong, wanting to vent his anger and fear, but an inexplicable restraint in his mind, the power of the contract, made him completely collapse. He had a splitting headache, and he had to hug a table leg and keep banging his head against it, so that the pain from the outside world would disperse the invisible pain that was working in his mind. Master! Master! Boijin screamed, reaching out to Chen Ong. Forgive me, Master, forgive me. Chen Ong threw him a broken pillowcase. Boijin sobbed as he put it on. He knew that he had been transformed into a complete house elf. The memories of Boijin were still in his mind, but they only made him confused because a deep-rooted nature had taken root in his brain. You see, it's not difficult to make you obey and fear, is it? Chen Ong smiled. Chapter 760. But what's really interesting is the legend of the origin of this creature. It's said that there used to be two families of wizards on Delia Island, the McClivos and the McBuns. Because of a drunken manslaughter, the two families formed a blood debt. One night, the McClivos wizards surrounded the McBuns' house and used a transfiguration spell to transform all the McBuns into five-legged monsters. This is the origin of the five-legged monsters. Later, I realized that when the ancient wizards created the magical creatures, a black magic transfiguration spell played a key role. On the other hand, the few times in the history of magic, when the fairies rebelled and the appearance of the house elves, may also have been influenced by this transfiguration spell. I believe that when dealing with the rebellious fairies, some ancient black wizards used transfiguration spell to transform them into the predecessors of the house elves. Then, they used a related spell to enslave their brains, and used contract magic to pass on this enslavement, resulting in the current house elves. Therefore, a few days ago, I got my hands on a five-legged monster through your channels and dissected that little house elf of yours. Of course, no mystical creatures were harmed during this process. In the end, they were all strengthened and modified, even gaining true freedom. I've also finally recovered a portion of the content of the ancient black magic's transformation technique. Then, I conducted an experiment on you just now, and the result was very successful. We still don't know what spell the ancient wizards used to enslave the house elves, but they must have been extremely evil. Modern wizards, including that Dumbledore, don't seem to have any objections. Now that I've developed a spell to turn wizards into house elves, if I provide it to those pure-blooded wizards, will they turn all Muggle wizards into house elves? If I transform Dumbledore into a house elf, will he show his love and tolerance? I believe that Hogwarts needs the services of Dumbledore the house elf. Ha ha. Chen Ong laughed and nodded his head. Boijin trembled at the side. He muttered, Master will be the most terrifying black devil in history. Wizards will tremble at your feet. Dumbledore, go to hell. Long live Master. The ancient Magi's modifications are truly evil. Chen Ong looked at him and sighed. After enslaving a race for centuries, a race that is not inferior to the wizards, or even more powerful, the house elf was cursed and contracted, but because of this, not only did its bloodline not degenerate during the inheritance, but it also maintained its magic power when the wizards were constantly degenerating. Now, the magic power of most house elves is far stronger than that of their masters. Malfoy is probably no match for them, and Creature actually survived the contract and curse while fighting against Voldemort. If I let them obtain true freedom, how will they repay their masters, the wizards who trampled on them? Interesting. Master. Bojin grabbed Chen Eng's trousers in fear and said timidly, "I don't have a name yet. According to the naming rules of House Elf, you will be called Gru." Chen Ong clenched the wand in his hand and said calmly, "A new rule is coming into effect. A race that has been enslaved is about to be liberated. They deserve to be free and vent their anger at being enslaved. Morgoth needs to bestow favor on them and make them obey. They have to obey because Morgoth is their destined master. Those who enslave others are destined to be enslaved, and those who are enslaved will obtain the freedom they promised until they worship Morgoth as their master and realize that Morgoth is indeed the greatest." Chen Ong clicked on the Lord God's quest prompt. Main Quest 1. Obtain a valid identity in Hogwarts Academy. Quest completed. Main Quest 2 activated. Reward: 8,000 reward points. If the quest fails, 20,000 reward points will be deducted. If the quest fails, the reward will be erased. Side Quest 1. Open the Chamber of Secrets. Reward: 5,000 reward points. If the quest fails, 5,000 reward points will be deducted. If the quest fails, the reward will be erased. Side Quest 2. Win the Top 3 Cup. Quest completed. Reward: 5,000 reward points. If the quest fails, 5,000 reward points will be deducted. If the quest fails, the reward will be erased. After Chen Ong entered the HP world, he received a mission notification from the Lord God. However, he did not intend to devote his energy to the mission. His main purpose was to contact Darth Morgoth. This was the rule projection of His Holiness Ong Chen, the god who represented the force of darkness and evil. He had once caused a battle for the Silmarils on the Faerun continent. He had raised a Silmaril that represented his divinity into the sky and entered the astral world, giving birth to a star on the Faerun continent. And Morgoth's will could interfere with the Faerun continent through the star known as Mirko. Chen Ong felt that before the Republic launched a counterattack on the Lord God's dimension, he needed something else to distract the Lord God's attention. It just so happened that Darth Morgoth, the projection of his counterpart from another dimension, wanted to spread his presence to other worlds. Both sides hit it off. Chen Ong was preparing to raise the star representing Morgoth. After the star of Mirko rose, Morgoth would use this star to carry out his will in the HP world. According to the agreement, he was going to find trouble with the Lord God and spread his presence to multiple worlds. In short, he was going to cause trouble. Gru. Chen Ong turned his head and ordered. A house elf draped in rags flashed in front of Chen Ong using the Phantom Shift spell. It lay on the ground for a while before shaking its groggy head and getting up. Chen Ong kicked it 3 meters away and reprimanded, "As a house elf, you are really useless." Gru got up and wailed, "Gru is the shame of house elves. Gru is useless. Gru made Master angry. Gru deserves to die. Familiarize yourself with your body. The way a house elf uses a spell is different from a wizard," Chen Ong said coldly. He threw Bojin's wand to it and said in a low voice, "From now on, you will use the phantom spell to disguise yourself as Bojin. Help me manage the related industries and familiarize yourself with the spell. If anything goes wrong, I will give you a sock." Gru screamed, "Don't chase me away, Master! Then work hard. When my plan is completed, I might return Bojin's name to you. But if you disappoint me, then prepare to be a house elf for the rest of your life." With that, Chen Ong did not care about Gru hitting the pillar and said, "Gru wants to be a house elf for the rest of his life. No. Master, I will definitely complete the task. Please protect my name. I am Gru. No. I am Bojin." Chapter 761. Chen Ong was temporarily staying at Boggin's estate in Hogsmeade, the only village in England that was entirely populated by wizards. Hogwarts School was located next to the large lake that originated from the village. The architecture here was eccentric. The cottages had thatched roofs like a medieval village. Even though wizards had been able to build tall, modern buildings like the Ministry of Magic, Chen-ong was still unable to do so. However, the neurotic and eccentric nature of wizards was engraved in their blood, so they would make all kinds of choices that normal people would find strange. On one hand, it was because wizards who mastered magic power had different living habits from muggles. Most muggles thought dangerous and troublesome things were just a matter of waving their wands. Therefore, they were clumsy and impatient. It was as if the words careful and tidy did not exist in their dictionary. For muggles, messy and disorganized habits would make them unable to find things, but for wizards, it was just a matter of a flying spell. They were also not afraid of breaking or destroying things, because as long as it was not a magic item, a repair-as-new spell could restore it to its original state. And when it was a mess, a clean-as-new spell could make it as neat as new. Therefore, wizards had a different understanding of damage, and mess than muggles. They could not care about these problems that could be easily solved by magic. Therefore, in the eyes of muggles, they were all like naughty children, endlessly indulging themselves. On the other hand, the magic bloodline that gave them made them neurotic, crazy, and eccentric. According to the results of Chen-ang's research on Bagan's bloodline, the surging magic in the bloodline would erode their rationality. This result surprised Chen-ong, because wizards eventually developed in the direction of Cthulhu, or in other words, they eventually leaned towards magic. Magic power, on the other hand, was completely different from the rational perspective that humans use to observe the world. Magic power was another way of observing the world. From the perspective of science and humans, it seems somewhat chaotic and difficult to interpret. Its logic and internal laws were indescribable and chaotic in the eyes of humans. The magic of wizards, in the end, was indescribable. The more powerful a wizard was, the crazier he would be. Of course, this was also the proof that they were closer to the truth of magic, because this kind of magic itself was chaotic and irrational. If the arcana that Chen-ong learned was the rationality and wisdom of magic, then the magic of the wizards in this world was the manifestation of the chaotic and disorderly side of magic. The young wizards who have just awakened their magic are the closest to a normal human being. But as they grow older, the magic in their blood will gradually erode their rationality, making it harder and harder for them to understand humans, or what they call muggles, because humans, muggles, are governed by reason. The behavior of the old wizards was getting weirder and weirder. They would eat the livers of toads, the innards of bats, and the eyes of eels. They would allow their appearance to change, usually becoming uglier and more distorted, with protruding knuckles, skinny as bones, and close to insanity. Of course, these symptoms would only appear in the most severe cases of mages. Under normal circumstances, only the poorest mages at the bottom of society would become like this in their later years. Learning powerful black magic would also accelerate this symptom. They would be corroded by magic to the point of almost mutating. And those pure-blood families with deep roots, because of inherited magic and superior bloodline, rarely showed such changes before old age. Magic eroded their rationality, but magic helped them to slow down the process. Pure-blood families. They were the product of natural law and human selection, the survival of the fittest. Their bloodline was relatively stable, and they were resistant to the erosion of magic. So even when they died of old age, they only looked a little weird. They would carefully choose their own marriage partners to prevent the deterioration of their bloodline. Even so, the magic of their natural bloodline would continue to deteriorate, and they would become weaker and smaller. However, for those poor sorcerer families with poor bloodlines, pure-blooded sorcerers had the right to look down on them, even to the extent of viewing them as scum. Chen-ong had investigated in the taverns where sorcerers often gathered and discovered that most non-pure-blooded families would become lunatics in the eyes of normal people as they aged. Of course, the Ministry of Magic turned a blind eye to this. The magic resistance of pure-blood families was not unconditional. Once they became proficient in black magic, they would also show signs of this kind of madness. Mud Seed was not the twisted pride of the pure-blood sorcerers. It was a disdainful title given to the non-pure-blood sorcerers after they saw the sorcerers who were not pure-blood and had not been filtered for a long time become ugly and crazy in their old age. They began to eat stinky things such as toads and bats, and they became bloodthirsty and mentally unstable. They realized that if they allowed non-pure blood to mix with their bloodline, it would cause their noble bloodline to deteriorate. Coupled with the impact of wizards with Muggle blood on the interests, there were two schools of thought in the magic world about the erosion of magic. The representative of the pure blood families, Voldemort, proposed that the greatness of wizards came from their bloodline. Wizards with pure blood had strong magic power and were elegant and calm, while wizards with mixed blood with Muggles would eventually become twisted and ugly. The Light Wizards, led by Dumbledore, believed that the root cause of wizards becoming evil, dark, and crazy was black magic, and that wizards with Muggle blood only had a lower resistance to black magic. Of course, in Chen Ang's opinion, both sides were idiot. No one dared to propose that the factor that caused wizards to become crazy was magic, because that would be denying the pride of the entire magic world. Wizards were proud of their own magic. They believed that all that made them extraordinary was those magical spells and powerful magic power. If they were to deny magic power, wouldn't that be the same as denying everything about them? Undoubtedly, Bwajin also showed his twisted and eccentric side. He cast the fiery loyalty curse in Hogsmeade Village, but it was dirty and messy inside. The houses were dilapidated, showing the same aesthetics of wizards as the Broken Cauldron Pub, Number 12, Grimald Square, and the Shack. It was surprisingly consistent with the style of Hogsmeade Village and Diagon Alley. For wizards, keeping clean and tidy only required 1 or 2 spells. It was not difficult to create a magnificent, comfortable, and luxurious residence. Magic was enough to achieve all this, but they just had to be dirty and small. Other than mental problems, what else could explain all this? Chen Ong pushed open the door, which was full of fingernail scratches and made people's hair stand on end. The porch was a large, empty room, with peeling wallpaper, tattered carpets stained with dried blood, some rusty lanterns, and some chandeliers and candlesticks covered with broken cobwebs. There was a staircase leading upstairs. On the wall, there were some portraits that had turned black with age. Hearing the sound of the door being pushed open, these portraits began to wake up. They turned to look at Chen Ong and suddenly opened their mouths to mumble. The ear-piercing sounds intertwined with each other, and some of the portraits of old women began to scream. Chen Ong looked at them coldly. He raised his hand slightly and said softly, "Avada wants to kill." Suddenly, the whole room became quiet. Chen Ong walked among the frozen portraits and slowly walked up the stairs. Behind him, the house elf Gollum showed a horrified expression. It excitedly shook the silent portraits and screamed, "Grandpa Herbert, Grandma Belvina? Aunt Bernamo? Oh my God! Master! You killed them! Shut up! Those are just fake memories." Their reactions, their actions, were all driven by the curse behind them. Letting the portraits come to life is definitely one of the most stupid things in history. I really don't know what these wizards were thinking. Let the dead die, but why did they create a pile of fake memories and use a curse to deceive themselves? He glanced at the dirty room and ordered Gollum, "Tidy up this place. Make it spotless. Put all the messy things in the basement. I don't want to see anything useless except for the necessary furniture." Chapter 762. For the next 3 days, Chen Ong ordered grew around like a tired dog. It had to beg Chen Ong to cast an illusion spell on it so that it could maintain Bwajin's appearance and discuss business with the dark wizards it was familiar with. The gold coins in Bwajin's vault flowed out like water in exchange for the bodies of precious magical animals or magic herbs. The 8-eyed spider in the dense jungle of Kalimantan, the chimera in the mountains of Greece, the black dragon flying in the sky above the Hihaiti Islands, the fireball dragon living in the ancient land of China, the poisonous cyst leopard in the Great Rift Valley of East Africa. The cubs and eggs of these precious or dangerous magical animals were transported in batches to Chen Ang's laboratory. Chen Ang cast a traceless stretch spell on a suitcase, expanding it to a huge space of about 500 acres so that Gru could place the magical animals. When it saw the huge space, Gru was deeply shocked. Pino, another house elf who used to belong to Bujin, was now in charge of taking care of these magical animals. Pino, who completely treated Chen Ang as his master, did not recognize Gru at all and even wanted to bully him. Only then did Gru realize that without the constraints of the magic contract, he could not control this house elf at all. In fact, Pino was much better than him in the application of magic spells. Gru, who had already become a slave, was now fighting with his house elf to please Chen Ang. Chen Ang's recent experiments were trying to create a snake monster. Legend had it that the snake monster came from the magic egg laid by a 7-year-old rooster when it was in the sky above Sirius, and it was hatched by a toad. Chen Ang judged that it would undoubtedly require a high-level black magic to make a rooster lay an egg when it was in the sky above Sirius. He tried to transform the rooster into a hen and use the power of Sirius to curse the rooster, but he failed in the end. The eggs laid by the rooster had no life force or aura of soul at all. The main reason was that Sirius was in the sky. Sirius usually appeared in winter or early spring, so it was easier to use its power using the winter triangle as a reference. It was summer in the northern hemisphere. Although Chen Ang moved the experiment site to the southern hemisphere with magic, the experiment was still disrupted. Chen Ang had read a lot of magic books about creating basilisks. He found that although this magical creature seemed easy to create, there had been no sightings of it for 400 years. Maybe it was because all the witnesses had died. But this at least showed how difficult it was. In the end, Chen Ang discovered that it was still a curse problem. The essence of the basilisk was a magical creature created by using the power of Sirius. The rooster and toad were just a kind of magic medium to create its body. In the book of Isaiah, there was a record of the basilisk. They break the eggs of vipers and weave spider webs. The person who swallowed the egg would find a poisonous lizard inside after breaking the egg. The poisonous lizard here was a snake monster. Since then, this magical creature often appeared in the Bible. The most detailed mention was in a book written by the famous wizard Alexander Nacum in the 1280s AD. However, it was not included in the poisonous lizard section. Instead, it was included in the rooster section. Its egg must be laid in the days of Sirius and fertilized by a 7-year-old rooster. This kind of egg is easy to recognize. It is not an ordinary egg, but spherical, without a shell, covered with a thick layer of skin. And this egg must be incubated by a toad, so it will hatch into this extremely poisonous monster, a snake with the characteristics of a toad and a rooster. Chen Ang believed that he had found the origin of this monster. It was born in Israel, Greece, Abraxas or Abraxas, Abrasax or Abraxas. Abraxas was the supreme being in the cosmology system of the Gnostics, an important heretical sect of early Christianity. However, due to the defeat of the Gnostics in the battle against the Orthodox Christianity, Abraxas was demoted to a fallen angel in the scriptures of the Orthodox Christianity. He had the head of a rooster and the lower body of a snake, and his attainments in alchemy were extremely profound. In the description of the Gnostics, Abraxas was actually a synonym for the invisible supreme, the creator of spirituality, an existence higher than God. Chen Ang believed that the snake monster's black magic ritual should have originated from this mysterious sect that combined Greek philosophy, Persian Zoroastrianism, Egyptian mystery religion, Babylonian astrology, and so on. It was the sect's attempt to trace back to an inferior version of the invisible supreme ritual. The snake monster's creator, the despicable Hilbo, had obtained a part of the Gnostics' magic ritual. In order to obtain the power of this sect, he used black magic to steal a trace of Abraxas' power. The despicable Hilbo was a Greek black wizard who spoke in a snake language, Greece was the region where the Gnostics were active. This clumsy imitation was the snake monster. At this time, Chun-Ong had completely understood how to create a snake monster. Stealing a trace of Abraxas' power was a piece of cake for him. He also discovered some secrets of the ancient wizards. Although the wizards claimed that there was no god in the world, the so-called Jesus was only a powerful wizard. However, it was a self-evident fact that the ancient wizard civilization originated from the mystical knowledge passed down by the ancient sections. The magic of the wizards was actually the knowledge passed down by the ancient sects that originated from the god. The ancient gods, on the other hand, were an indescribable, abnormally chaotic non-personality. This coincided with the magic that Chun-Ong discovered in the blood of the modern wizard. After knowing how to create the snake monster, Chun-Ong lost interest in creating the snake monster. He felt that the technical content of such a magical creature like the snake monster was too low. If he wanted to create it, it would be better to create the predecessor of the snake monster, a non-inferior version of the Gnostic sects, the invisible supreme being, Abraxas. Chun-Ong planned to create such an existence in several stages. First, he would create a snake monster to practice his skills. Then, he would create the Jewish angel Obase with a coxcomb's head and a snake's body. Chun-Ong speculated that this kind of angel should have the special power to kill upon sight. Its name, Abracadabra, meant "I bless the dead." And the ancient magic text, Avodakadavra in Aramaic, meant "everything will be destroyed." This would be an angel of death. According to the description of its magic power in the magic text, everything the snake monster saw would be petrified, and everything Obase saw would be destroyed and die. Because this ancient magic ritual was too incomplete, Chun-Ong tried his best to collect information and complete it. He then modified it according to what he had learned. He used the arcane magic of instant death as the core and focused on Obase's divinity. The final creation should be a divine creature. Although Obase should be an angel based on his status, what Chun-Ong created with magic was only a symbolic creature, after all, and could only touch the boundary of a divine creature. In the end, Chun-Ong wanted to create Abraxas, the invisible supreme one, which was the creation of spirituality, an existence higher than God. The basilisk was just a clumsy imitation of him. Without even a billionth of his power, it would be too difficult to trace him using the ritual of creating the basilisk. Even the original Gnostic ritual would not be able to trace 1/10,000th of his existence. Originally, I just wanted to create a snake monster for fun, but I didn't expect it to become such a big project in the end. I can only say, fate makes fools of people. Chun-Ong sighed as he looked at the third version of the design that he had modified. This was indeed a big project. Chun-Ong might not be able to complete it even if he had 50 years, but once it was created, it would be enough to be the carrier of Morgoth. Gru looked at the design, which was full of complex magic symbols. Its face was full of shock and confusion. It could no longer understand what was contained in the design. Even if it was a ritual used to create a snake monster, after Chun-Ang's improvement, the hatched snake monster would not be an ordinary one. Chapter 763. Chun-Ong, who was immersed in magic research, analyzing the bloodlines of magical animals, and biochemical experiments, as well as the unfinished research in God's dimension, was only called out of the lab by Gru a week later. Chun-Ong, who was immersed in his studies and research, was not in a good mood after being interrupted. He had just made a breakthrough in his research on trolls. From his analysis of the arcane experiments, he found that the bloodline of trolls was quite similar to the bloodline power in a tube of troll strengthening serum from the World of Warcraft that he had bought in God's dimension. Arcane research on biological bloodlines was different from technology's obsession with genetic inheritance. Although the expression of the genes in the two samples was quite different, in terms of arcane classification, they were very similar in nature. Chen Ong originally wanted to add another race to the world of magic to recreate the grand scene of the various aliens from the world of Warcraft fighting for supremacy in Azeroth. Even the basic materials were already provided for him by this world. Murlocs could be strengthened into Naga and Murlocs, centaurs could be modified into centaurs, ghosts needed negative energy radiation to have the foundation to mutate, and most likely needed Professor Chen's help to modify them before they could evolve into undead. Ghouls, vampires, and werewolves all had incomplete bloodlines, and Professor Chen had a lot of materials to make them whole. The bloodline strengthening routes for trolls were mostly divided into two types. One was the Farron type of trolls, which had amazing recovery abilities, and the other was the indigenous trolls of Azeroth. In the future, after being modified by magic radiation, they might even be able to transform into night elves. Among the materials that Chen Ong had collected in God's Dimension, there were quite a few bloodlines similar to magical creatures, and the many magical creatures in the world of magic were also a rich biological wealth. Using this world as a large-scale experimental site, it was a good idea to do a large-scale biochemical experiment. Just as Chen Ong was methodically preparing for the experiment, he was disturbed by Gru. Chen Ong calmly looked at this frightened house elf. Gru trembled, and secretly glanced at Chen Ang's dark expression, so it trembled even more. It opened its mouth a few times, but could not form a proper sentence. Chen Ong looked at this useless elf, and his mood was actually not as bad as it thought. Instead, he was thinking with great interest. The spells that ancient wizards used on fairies for dozens of generations still had such a strong binding force, and could even brainwash a vicious dark wizard into this in just a few days. This piqued his interest. "Master, old Malfoy just tried to contact you, wise Mr. Boggin. He had a batch of black magic items that he wanted to sell to his master. Among them were black magic items that Voldemort had rewarded him, as well as some poisons and magic books that had been passed down from generation to generation in the Malfoy family, as well as some goods that old Malfoy had obtained himself. Although it wasn't the best was buried under his living room, it was still the best in the market. But we're already short of funds. Should we buy them? You don't have to worry about funds. The gold coins that the sprites have will be mine sooner or later." Chen Ang's eyes were unfocused, and no one knew what he was thinking. A black magic item of the Malfoy family. I remember there was news recently that the Ministry of Magic is preparing to conduct a raid, and the situation is rather tense. That's why Malfoy is preparing to transfer the evidence left behind from Voldemort's era, right? Chen Ong asked. Gru replied carefully, "Yes, that's all the Ministry of Magic's way of getting money. Foggy, the Minister of Magic, is stupid. Even though everyone knows that he was pushed to power by Dumbledore, and Dumbledore only pushed him to power because those powerful big shots were either purebloods who colluded with Voldemort or were rejected by the pureblood. Foggy, that idiot, just happened to have a glib tongue, and was liked by those mud wizards at the bottom of the hierarchy. At the same time, he wouldn't be rejected by the purebloods. His brain isn't bad, but his bloodline isn't bad, and he didn't collude with Voldemort, so he was allowed to power. But after he came to power, he showed his stupidity. Master, we all know that he won't last long. That's why he's trying to make money. This kind of black magic item raid always causes those families who were on the wrong side and supported Voldemort to bleed out. The Malfoys used to be so mighty, but why is it not as great as it used to be? Isn't it the result of the Ministry of Magic's harvesting? Foggy got money for the Ministry of Magic, and gave those who weren't purebloods or didn't have a deep relationship with Voldemort the opportunity to squeeze out Malfoy's business. He gradually gained a foothold, and became the Minister of Magic. I didn't know he had such a trick up his sleeve. Gru slowly recalled the cunning and wisdom of Bujin, and his analysis was clear and logical. However, he was affected by his identity as a house elf. On one hand, he was sinister and cunning, and on the other hand, He bowed and scraped under Chen Ang's eyes. Chen Ang was puzzled. Then will it be safe for Malfoy to give you these things? Will you be able to handle these troubles? Don't get too involved and disturb me. Gru hurriedly jumped up. Master, that won't happen. This operation is mainly aimed at Malfoy and the other lackeys of Voldemort. I still have some influence in the Ministry of Magic, so they won't be able to get you involved. I'll definitely get things done and won't cause any trouble. Very good. When will Malfoy bring the things to you? Chen Ang nodded. Gru smiled fawningly. Probably the day after tomorrow. When the time comes, I'll personally receive them. I'm also very curious about the bloodline of the Platinum family. Dragon plague and syphilis aren't things that just anyone can get infected with. Chen Ang smiled. Chen Ang was really interested in the Malfoy family. Old Malfoy's name, Lucius, had the meaning of Venus, and Venus was the morning star. Thus, it was also the original name of the son of the morning star, Lucifer. It meant the son of light, the messenger of dawn. Combined with the tradition of a pure-blood family named after a constellation, it was not eye-catching. But his son, Draco or Draco Malfoy, his name meant the dragon star. Interestingly, he was very similar to the name of the famous Count Dracula. In Latin, Draco meant dragon or snake, while Dracula was the son of the dragon in English. One was a variation of dragon, and the other was the son of the dragon. It was no wonder that Draco Malfoy was so obsessed with dragons. The names of both father and son were actually the famous Devil King of Antichrist, which explained the evil lineage of their family. Chen Ang felt that they were quite fated with dragons. It was not the fire dragon of this world, but the ancient dragon that represented Satan and ancient evil, also known as the ancient serpent. And Chen Ang's body was born after the ancient serpent Chen Ang gave the Apocalypse clone, Adam's wisdom. Before Chen Ang left the Marvel world, he saw that the ancient serpent was not completely dead, but existed as the ancient dragon that would bring the ultimate dusk to the Asgardians. Chapter 764. Harry Potter could still hear Mrs. Weasley's words ringing in his ears. Close your eyes. There are many witchcraft mantles that we can choose as our final destination. But don't worry, as long as you tell us where you want to go, everything will be fine. Don't panic. Don't come out too early. Stay in the fireplace and only come out when you see Fred and George. But he seemed to have spelled Diagon Alley wrong. The spinning just now almost made him throw up. He had been staying at the Weasley shack for the summer holidays. It was much warmer than his aunt's house. At least the Weasley family did not have a fat and stupid child like Dolly. But before school started, when they went to Diagon Alley together, while sprinkling Floo powder through the fireplace, he yelled for the wrong destination. Through a rapidly spinning place full of green flames, he saw a blurry image of a fireplace and a house from the corner of his eye. But in his mind he thought, stop. He fell from mid-air onto the cold stone wall. His glasses flew out, and now his vision was a blur. Through the mosaic, Harry managed to find his glasses. They were a little broken, but they were still usable. When Harry put the glasses on his ears and his vision became clear again, he found himself in a dark, wide fireplace that looked like a wizard's shop. But it was full of strange things, even if the things in a wizard's shop were strange enough. However, the items here were more bizarre and dazzling than those in any other shop. Beside him was a glass display case. Inside it was a sculpture of a red monster, or perhaps a specimen. But from the appearance of the monster, Harry sincerely prayed that it was not a specimen of a real creature. The monster had a goat's head, 2 long and sharp horns. Its red skin was bare and hairless, but it was covered with burn marks and scars. Its ears were like those of a fairy, but its whole body was like a very muscular human. Looking at its muscles, Harry thought that this monster must be strong and violent. There was an inconspicuous label under the glass case. Harry glanced at it and read, Rogue Encampment, Specimen of a Fallen, be careful, if you encounter a wizard, This monster may come back to life. When Harry read the last section of the label, he was shocked by the owner's bloody warning. He took a few steps back in shock and bumped his head into a pile of hard-covered books behind him. The books scattered all over the floor. Harry hurriedly got up and accidentally placed his hand on a hard-covered black magic book. Through the scattered pages, Harry saw a series of evil magic rituals that made him blush. He hurriedly threw the book back into the pile. Only then did Harry notice how strange this place was. There were all kinds of masks on the wall staring at people with horrified expressions. There was a stone mask with fangs under its lips, a clown with blood-red eyes and a jaw that could open and close. Looking closely, there was a line of tags under it that read, "I want to play a game with you." There was a label under it that said, "I want to play a game with you." There was a mask that looked like a pig's nose, covering the lower half of the face, revealing only the mouth and nose with a fence. There was also a worn-out hockey mask with a small print under it that said, "Come to Mommy, Jason, Mommy loves you." There was a green wooden mask with only an upright iron ridge as the bridge of the nose. There was a label that said, "According to unreliable sources, this mask is the work of Loki, the god of mischief. After I asked Loki, he denied it." The weirdest thing was a gold-plated steel mask. The high-tech design made it stand out from the rest of the weird old mask. Other than that, there was a wooden mask with a spiral pattern showing only one eye, a golden mask that looked like it was made of gold, full of majesty and dominance, a skull mask that was missing a quarter of the upper right corner, and of course, the most peculiar thing was a pair of black-rimmed glasses placed in the center of the mask. It was the most ordinary but the most extraordinary of all the masks. Harry noticed the comment below and lightly described, "This is a pair of glasses that no one can recognize when you take it off. It's the best match for a high-waisted suit." What a magical tool, Harry sighed as he rubbed his glasses. "I'd better get out of here as soon as possible." Harry thought to himself that his nose was still throbbing from hitting it against the fireplace. Ignoring that, he crept briskly towards the door. But when he was halfway there, he saw two figures on the other side of the glass door. One of them was the last person Harry wanted to see, Dracula Malfoy, especially now that he was lost, covered in soot, and wearing a pair of broken glasses. Harry looked around and found a big black cupboard on his left. It was really a big cupboard made of heavy wood. He took a big stride and opened the door of the cupboard. It was full of thick fur coat. The tall cupboard was like a small room. Harry rushed in and closed the door, leaving only a small gap, just enough to see what was going on in the shop outside. In his panic, he didn't notice that there was also a small label on the top of the cupboard. It read, "Magic cupboard made of the last apple of youth." Harry paid no attention to what was hidden in the depths of the closet behind him. He listened. A few seconds later, the doorbell rang and Malfoy and his father walked into the store. Harry's hair stood on end when he saw his old enemy. He didn't feel the cold air blowing on his neck. He was so engrossed in spying on Malfoy that he didn't even notice the cold air behind him. Malfoy frowned at the unfamiliar furnishings as soon as he stepped into the shop. He hesitated for a moment to confirm that this was Boggin's shop of dark magic. He then rang the bell at the counter. Then he turned to his son and said, "Don't touch anything, Dracula." Malfoy was admiring a glass jar filled with liquid. Floating in the jar were a bunch of bright red eyeballs. He heard Harry's words and said, "I thought you were going to buy me a present. Look, it's so beautiful." Old Malfoy looked back and saw the pair of bright red eyeballs full of life and resistance. He frowned and said, "Dracula, that's not a good thing. It carries a strong sense of misfortune, and will definitely bring misfortune to its owner." Looking at the pair of eyeballs that he was 100% sure had been dug out of some unlucky fellow's eye socket, old Malfoy sneered, "And hasn't its owner already paid the price for it? Does Mr. Malfoy like those eyeballs?" Chun-Ong came out of the inner room. Of course, everyone saw that he was still Boggin's greasy appearance. Chun-Ong said enthusiastically, Those are the eyes of the Kaluta tribe. When they are agitated, their pupils turn bright red. If they die now, the red color will never fade. Chapter 765. I'm not here to buy anything today, Mr. Boggin, I'm here to sell something, old Malfoy hurriedly explained, interrupting Chen Ang's sales pitch when he saw Decola's eyes light up. You're here to sell something? Chen Ong revealed a look of interest. So, Mr. Malfoy, what do you want to sell to this shop? You should have heard of it. The Ministry of Magic has been conducting a surprise inspection recently, old Malfoy said as he took out a roll of parchment from his bosom. On it were the names of some magical items and raw materials written densely in cursive, and he showed it to Chen Ong. I have some collections that are not convenient to sell here. I hope to sell them here. Mr. Boggin, the Ministry of Magic wouldn't have gotten wind of this, would they? Chen Ong calmly picked up the parchment and examined it. He even had the spare energy to deal with old Malfoy. Of course, Mr. Malfoy, I've been staying in the shop today and don't know anything. Don't know. Old Malfoy laughed. Well said, you don't know anything. I don't think the Ministry of Magic will bother you, right? Who knows? Chen Ong complained. They haven't bothered me yet, but I don't know in the future. But, no matter what, this has nothing to do with you, Mr. Malfoy. You are a decent person. Ha ha. Old Malfoy laughed and even coughed. He panted slightly. Yes, we have always been decent people, and the Malfoys have some reputation in the magic world. However, the Ministry of Magic is becoming more and more meddlesome. Their appetites are too big. How greedy. Malfoy's tone contained a hint of anger that could not be suppressed. These poisons are very good quality. What is this? Decola interrupted their conversation and picked up a magic book with a hard cover and a black background. It was engraved with complex and strange magic symbols. Coincidentally, this was the same book that Harry Potter had just picked up. You can call it the Dark Bible. Chen Ong looked at him with interest. What a fine material. Chen Ong seemed to be able to see the Malfoy's counterattack scenario that could happen in the future. He enthusiastically explained, this is a black magic book that records some forbidden magic knowledge. It hides the secrets of how to obtain power over people. Listen to me, this is not an ordinary magic book. If you study it, you will find that it records the secrets of control and desire, enslavement and control, as well as the secrets of power and domination. This is a book that truly studies how to enslave people. With it, you will always. Mr. Malfoy, your son has a unique eye, Chen Ong praised sincerely. This book is so ingenious that only the Pink Book can compare to it. Others such as Solomon's 72 Keys, Gates' Necromancy Book, Black Female Bird, Ghoul Dan's Notes, Abdul's Necromancy Book, Black Book of the Undead, Golden Book of the Sun, Sunfall City's Guide, Lord Xian's 7 Secret Scriptures, our Ela texts, and Thorn Scrolls are far from comparable. Hearing this, Harry felt his blood boil. I can't let Malfoy get his hands on this evil thing, or tell Dumbledore after he buys it. He focused even more on the gap in the wardrobe, not willing to miss a single detail. I want my son to stay away from it. Old Malfoy snatched the book from Dracula's hands and threw it back into the pile of books. He also saw a book with a golden cover and ancient Egyptian runes engraved on it. Even though it was just a flash of light, he was sure that he felt the terrifying magic contained in this book. Mr. Malfoy, are you interested in this Golden Book of the Sun? Chen Ong introduced. This is the teachings of the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra. It records the secrets and curses of the Egyptian gods. Legend has it that it has the power to resurrect the dead. It was a supreme treasure passed down from generation to generation by the high priests of ancient Egypt. It took me a lot of effort to deal with their last high priest, Imhotep, to get my hands on it. Enough of that. Bwajin, stop your little tricks. There are no gods in this world. Old Malfoy said coldly. He seemed to be strict with Dracula, but he was actually very concerned. "Dracula, I've warned you before. You have to be careful with something you don't know. Unless you completely understand it, it's best to be careful with magic items of unknown origin, especially black magic items." Old Malfoy turned to Chen-Ong and said, "Old Buijin, put away your golden book of the sun. Perhaps those stupid muggles will take it seriously, but wizards know that the dead cannot be resurrected. Go and trick those muggles." "No, no, no. Mr. Malfoy, the magic of resurrection exists." Chen-Ong shook his head. "This concerns my reputation, I have to make myself clear." He stepped forward and used the key to open the golden book of the sun. The golden pages reflected a moving, holy golden light in the dark magic shop. A warm, tranquil power flowed through the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs on the pages. Chen-Ong spread open the golden book of the sun and tapped the pages with his wand so that everyone could clearly see the mysterious power flowing through the words. "According to my research, the high priests of ancient Egypt could resurrect the dead using the Black Book of the Dead, granting them the power of death and turning them into mummies. But if you use the golden book of the sun as a sacrifice, you can turn a mummy into a living person. A real, living person." Old Malfoy said angrily, "I've been to Egypt, and I've seen those so-called mummies clearly. There's nothing special about them. If you're willing to spend a gold coin, you can even take a picture with them. The Egyptian wizards made a lot of money from this." "No, not those kinds of mummies." Chen-Ong shook his head. "They're real, undead spirits that have returned from the underworld." "Buijin, you're willing to say anything to earn money," Old Malfoy said angrily. "Let's get down to business. Do you want these things or not?" "Yes. Of course, the price must be lower." Chen-Ong neatly stated his purchase price while muttering in a low voice, "This is not nonsense. If you can obtain the legendary Stone of Resurrection and use the power of this book to set up a magic ritual, you can really bring people back from the dead. Of course, you'll have to pay a price." "Stop!" Old Malfoy interrupted him. "I'll wait for you at the manor tomorrow to transport the goods away." Chapter 766. Chen-Ong continued to discuss the price with Old Malfoy, but his attention was already on Dracula, who was curiously looking at the junk in the shop and slowly approaching the wardrobe that Potter was hiding in. Dracula seemed to still be thinking about the Dark Bible. He stopped in front of the fallen specimen and read a card stuck on an ornate scepter. He read it out loud. "This is a famous mutated lord called the Weaver of Fate. It was thrown into a dimension called the Well of Eternity by its master, the evil god of chaos, Sench, and obtained some knowledge about future knowledge and the consequences of madness. There were 81 mutated lords responsible for recording its crazy mutterings, and this is the scepter of one of them. I believe that he left some interesting prophecies on it, which will only be revealed when facing the master of the prophecy." "What is this?" Dracula asked excitedly. "What, Sench? What mutated lord? I've never heard of them. Just because you haven't heard of them doesn't mean they don't exist." An indescribable shadow figure appeared in front of Dracula and spoke in a low voice. Its face was not blurry, but it was hard to see it clearly, as if it could not be looked at directly. Dracula turned around nervously, but his father acted as if he did not see anything and was still bargaining with Buijin. "Who are you?" Dracula asked in a low voice. "Do you know who my father is? If you dare hurt me, he is right behind me and will tear you to pieces. All things in this world belong to one." "I don't care who your father is," the shadow said. "I am just a key to the door." After saying that, he fell into a long silence. Dracula waited for a while, but when he did not see any reaction, he kicked the ornate scepter in frustration. The eyes on it suddenly opened and light shone on Dracula. He saw some things in the light: Dumbledore who had fallen from the tower, his father who was crawling at the feet of a strange man without a nose, and the death of Harry Potter, whom he hated the most, and many familiar classmates who were looking at a platinum-haired boy with fear and hatred. When he turned around, Dracula was shocked to see a familiar face, as if he had grown up. In the distorted light and shadow, on another path, he saw Harry Potter holding his wand and casting a death curse at Dumbledore. He saw Harry Potter taking off the ring on Dumbledore's finger and fiddling with the black gem on it. He saw his godfather, Snape, with tears in his eyes, bowing to Harry Potter and excitedly opening a golden magic book for him. It was the Golden Sun scripture. What scared Dracula the most was that he saw his own corpse at Harry Potter's feet. His heart was beating so fast that he let out a loud cry. When he got out of the illusion, the scepter was right in front of him. It was as if everything that had happened before was just an illusion. Dracula? What's wrong? His father turned around and asked. No, nothing. Dracula instinctively did not want to tell his father about this, so he lied. I was just scared by it. He pointed to the fallen specimen. It says that it will resurrect when it encounters a wizard. Dracula added, afraid of being exposed. Dracula, I hope you are stronger than a girl. Your grades are no longer as good as a girl from a Muggle family. At least you should be braver than her, even though she is a Gryffindor. Then old Malfoy sneered at Chen. You shouldn't have written such a ridiculous rumor as if it was true. Bwajin, the last time I came here, you didn't have these messy things in your shop. At that time, you were a reliable and honest black magic material merchant. This is the reason why I often trade with you. I can guarantee that all my goods are honest and reliable. In Knockout Alley, you might not be able to find another shop owner who is as honest and practical as I am. My shop is filled with all kinds of magical items. That fallen specimen is one of a kind, and the markings on it are correct. If it encounters a fallen sorcerer, then it might really be resurrected. While Chen was arguing with old Malfoy, Dracula had gradually calmed down. He recalled the voices he had heard in the illusion. Those Death Eaters actually bowed at Harry Potter's feet in awe. What were they shouting? The Dark Devil. They actually called Harry Potter the Dark Devil. Malfoy Dracula felt a strong sense of jealousy and anger. How dare they call Harry Potter that? That good-for-nothing. Apart from an ugly scar, he knows nothing. How can he be worthy of this honorific? This should belong to me. Malfoy Dracula made up his mind. He could not let such a terrible thing happen. Harry Potter saw Malfoy's twisted and disgusted expression from the wardrobe. He heard Malfoy muttering to himself, "Was what I saw just a prophecy? I can't let it happen. Harry Potter does not deserve to sit in that position, even though he killed Dumbledore." I killed Dumbledore? In the wardrobe, Harry was shocked beyond words. What kind of nonsense is Malfoy thinking? Harry saw Dracula sneaking glances at the golden magic book, his eyes full of suspicion. He whispered so softly that only Harry, who was hiding in the wardrobe, could hear him clearly. That Golden Sun scripture, and Dumbledore's ring. Is that the Life Stone? If that's the case, then did Harry Potter really find the secret to resurrection? Then how did he know? Dracula frowned. How did he get his hands on this book? Harry could not help but hold his breath when he heard the word resurrection. His ears did not miss a single word that Dracula said. But Dracula had already discovered the wardrobe. His eyes were filled with hesitation and horror. He muttered to himself, "Unless he's here right now." Hearing this, Harry's heart almost stopped. He almost suffocated as he watched Malfoy's hand slowly reach for the wardrobe's handle. But at that moment, old Malfoy shouted from the other end of the counter, "Dracula, come here." Malfoy Dracula flashed a smile that Harry was familiar with. It was arrogant and disgusting. He said, "I must be crazy to think that. Arrogant Potter is still at his disgusting uncle's house. He can't even eat. How could he come to Knockover Alley?" Dracula turned around and walked away. Harry wiped the non-existent sweat off his forehead. At this moment, He suddenly felt that the wardrobe was very cold as the coldest winter. The cold air was coming from the dense coat behind him, which made Harry a little curious. On the other side, Dracula was pestering old Malfoy to buy the magic book made of gold, but Chen-Ong offered a sky-high price. "Are you crazy, Borgin? I can buy your whole shop with that money," Malfoy said angrily. Chen-Ong insisted, "It's worth that much. It's a magic item made of magical gold, and it has the unparalleled power of resurrection. This is already a bargain." Chapter 767. The moment the door closed, Chen-Eng's attitude became obviously perfunctory. He said in a low voice, "Old Malfoy spat out a lot of things under Dumbledore's pressure. But I know you've hidden at least half of it. The legendary sacred relic of death, the old wand in Dumbledore's hands, the invisibility cloak passed down through the generations of the Potter family, and the life stone that disappeared without a trace. Could the life stone be in Voldemort's hands? What exactly is Dumbledore plotting?" Harry watched as Borgin muttered under his breath as he walked into the back room. To prevent Borgin from suddenly turning back, Harry held his breath and stayed in the wardrobe for a few more minutes. When he was sure Borgin wouldn't come out soon, he quietly slipped out of the wardrobe. He saw the golden sutra of the sun lying unguarded on the counter, but Borgin seemed to have taken the key with him. Looking at the magic book in the dark room, which exuded a peaceful and warm aura of light, the pages of the book that reflected light under the soothing aura of magic seemed to evoke the greediest desires in one's heart, striking at the weakest part of human nature. Harry had intended to leave just like that, but in that nostalgic warmth, he could not help but stop for a long time. He quietly stood where he was, not making a sound. As he guessed, Harry gently picked up the magic book. He did not see the strange key, which seemed to have been taken away by Borgin. But it did not matter because the book was open. Harry placed it horizontally into his robe, and the loose robe could easily accommodate the large magic book. The golden pages pressed tightly against his lower abdomen. Like a frightened quail, Harry hunched his body, trying to make the outline of the book less obvious in his robe. Then, he quickly passed through the glass display window and out the door of the shop. Holding the broken glasses tightly to his face, he looked around. He seemed to be in a dark, damp, back alley. On both sides of the alley were glass display windows with dried human skulls and bones, spiders, and toads. They seemed to be shops for dark magic. He looked up at the sign of the shop he had just walked out of. It read, Borgin Burke Dark Magic Supply Shop. When Harry saw two shabbily dressed wizards pointing at him from the doorway, he was so nervous that he almost suffocated. He had a strong urge to pull out his wand and give them a heads-up, but he suppressed it with great willpower. "Dear little friend, are you lost?" A strangely sharp sound, like a cat's paw scratching on glass, rang in Harry's ears, making him almost jump. Harry looked back to see an old, ugly witch dragging a tray full of human fingernails. Her face was wrinkled like a moldy orange, and she grinned, revealing sharp green teeth. Harry ran without looking back. He hugged the magic book in his arms and ran along the winding path of Knockover Alley. When he was about to exit the alley, he bumped into a tall figure. Harry quickly turned his head, and his heart almost jumped out of his chest. He did not greet the familiar figure and ran into the crowd at Diagon Alley without looking back. Hagrid did not react for a moment. He looked at Harry's back and exclaimed, "Harry?" The rabbit-like figure trembled, and ran even faster. Squeezing back and forth, it disappeared into the crowd. Hagrid did not know what happened, and he was not even sure that the figure was Harry's. But out of concern for Harry, he still chased after the figure, but by this time, Harry had already disappeared. On the second floor of Birkenberg's magic shop, Chen-Ong watched everything calmly. He smiled and said in a low voice, "The prophesied savior, the child who is on the right track, I am neither good nor evil towards this world. I only hope that you have more choices. Dumbledore, manipulating a person's life is one of the greatest evils. If a person's universal love is as pure as Dumbledore's in a certain sense, it is also very scary. The Jedi Masters believe that the brighter and purer a person's light is, the deeper and more extreme his dark side is. To a certain extent, Dumbledore is only a step away from being the most evil dark devil in history. When he firmly believes that his actions are for the good of everyone, and ignores the choices of others, then the world of magic will welcome the most terrifying dark devil in history, Dumbledore. Fate has split into two paths before my eyes. One path leads to Hogwarts Castle in the flames. The sleeping dragon has awakened, and the whole world of magic is shrouded in Dumbledore's shadow. Extreme kindness and love not only burn the people around Dumbledore, but also torment Dumbledore himself. In order to destroy evil, kindness must be sacrificed, and the purest are often the first to suffer. Voldemort's resurrection is not scary, but what is scary is that he will die in your hands, Dumbledore. The other path leads to the dark abyss, and the one closest to Voldemort is the one who is destined to end him. The research of Muggle criminal psychologists is not just empty talk. Childhood trauma has a lasting effect. No matter how cheerful a person is on the outside, there is bound to be a twisted side in the depths of their hearts. Dumbledore would never be able to imagine how cruel the Dursley family's child had to go through as he grew up. To a certain extent, Harry Potter, who carries Voldemort's soul fragment and has similar experiences, is the one who is most influenced by Voldemort, and is the one who is most similar to Tom Riddle. The moment he ends Voldemort, it could be the moment he walks towards the light and the ordinary, or it could be the moment he picks up the old magic wand that symbolizes power. Fate is so mysterious. This Golden Sun Sutra is my gift to all of you to fulfill the regrets in your hearts, to reverse the cruel fate of the past. It is also to tempt you, to make you face the greatest persecution of the dark abyss. Harry Potter, Snape, Dumbledore, everyone has made mistakes that they want to redeem. Now I am giving this opportunity to all of you, but when I place this opportunity to redeem my regrets in their hands, it often only pushes them deeper into the dark abyss. According to my prophecy, when I place this symbol of hope in your hands, these two paths that lead to darkness and the dark abyss will become the greatest possibilities in the future. Unless someone can take over the position of Voldemort, who is gradually losing his strength and can no longer threaten you, and become the new Black Devil King. Otherwise, the day you defeat Voldemort will be the day you break all ties, and one of you will take over the old magic wand and become the Black Devil King. For the peace of the world, for the future of the magic world, I, Chen Ong, have decided to become the Black Devil King, and stop this future that makes you feel despair. Kindness is only more precious when it is set off by evil, and justice is only shown when it is needed. The appearance of the Black Devil King is definitely not because of one person's depravity and distortion, but because of the eruption of the conflict at the bottom of the magic world, a life and death struggle between pure bloods and mixed bloods. The magic world needs a revolution, a complete purge. This is the mission of the third Black Devil King. Chapter 768. When Gru returned, he saw Chen Ong reading a black leather notebook covered in copper. There was a name pasted on the leather cover, Tom Marvolo. Marvolo Riddle, Tom Marvolo Riddle, was so engrossed that he did not even lift his head when Gollum arrived. Chen Ang's fingertips flickered with the blue light of arcane energy. As his index finger moved across the pages, he analyzed the delicate magic structures and soul fragments. Different from the magic in this world, the arcana that Chen Ong learned and used was a power with perfect internal logic and a strict system. Its energy was conserved and stable, and the rules of arcana operated according to order. On the Faerun continent, arcanists could use arcana to extract power from the 4 major elemental planes and the 8 derivative elemental planes. They had even created the magic net, a creation that extracted arcana energy from countless planes rich in energy. Although he had already left the multiverse where the Faerun continent was located and came to a universe without elemental planes, it was not difficult for Chen-Ong to extract arcana energy from the dark planes of this universe with his arcana level. In the study of arcanist spells, planes were an exquisite spatial concept. It was a kind of analysis and positioning of space by the Grand Arcanist. Although planes had theories based on the special laws of the multiverse where Faerun was located, there was also a general analysis of space in the universe. Chen-Ong combined the knowledge that the mages in the Marvel world opened dimensions and obtained the energy to cast magic. He combined it with Faerun's arcanist system and improved the source of arcana to obtain energy. When he first entered this universe, he had anchored some of the lower latitudes through some measurements of the universal constant. He had locked onto some planes that did not have the concept of time in those complicated and infinite dimensional spaces. Through these planes, Chen-Ong could use the vacuum ocean in the universe that fluctuated with Planck time to obtain endless safe energy. Other than that, he could also extract matter and mass from some planes of dark matter. He could even lock onto the spatial structure formed by the gravitational distortion of some massive stars, fire-like planes of elements, and extract energy and matter from them. This was the great power of the Grand Arcanists, as well as the macroscopic application of space, energy, and information cosmology. While the wizards of this world were still extracting the magic power in their blood and achieving some chaotic and disorderly results through magic that was essentially chaotic, Chen-Ong had already pried open the ocean of vacuum energy of the entire universe through the low-latitude dark plane and had boundless arcana power to squander. In particular, Chen-Ong had recently built the Well of Eternity's vacuum zero-point energy plane absorption structure, which had increased the efficiency of energy mobilization to the stellar level. As Chen-Ang's research developed and his understanding of the structure of space in this universe deepened, the energy he could use would only become more and more powerful, and the arcana he could achieve would only become more and more terrible. This was the reason why he was able to remain calm. Now that the Well of Eternity's arcane creation was about to be completed, there was enough energy to weave a magic net that covered the entire Earth that contained level 9 spells. It's time to do something practical, Chen-Ong thought. He put down Voldemort's soul vessel. He now had a deep understanding of the madness and stupidity of the Dark Demon King. Putting aside how unreliable this method of splitting one's soul to achieve immortality was, placing this soul fragment in front of any great arcanist was tantamount to exposing one's everything. In the East, immortal cultivators guarded their names, birthdays, hair, and blood as if they were their lifeblood, while arcanists did their best to hide their real names in an attempt to deceive the gods. How stupid would one have to be to entrust one's reincarnation fragment to an ordinary magic notebook? The liches would love to use the indestructible supreme divine artifact to create their own soul box, and then banish the soul box to the astral plane and bury it in the outer plane, never to be found. A black devil king who was filled with hatred and whose subordinates all had ulterior motives had actually entrusted his soul fragment to a subordinate who had never been a loyal subject. It was the most foolish act in any world of magic. Why not bury it in concrete and sink it into a trench in the Pacific Ocean? Chen-Ong, who had been toying with Voldemort's soul for a long time and wantonly flipping through the memories in his soul fragment, never once saw the Black Devil as some sort of obstacle. This villain boss was destined to be doomed if Chen-Ong cursed his soul fragment, so how could Chen-Ong take it seriously? And this soul vessel, which was related to Voldemort's life, was obtained by Chen-Ong with a modified incantation on old Malfoy. Would you believe it if I told you that? A lich left his own soul box to his subordinates, placed it in the enemy's base, placed it in the treasury, placed it in his defenseless old house, and finally placed it carefully only to have it stolen by a subordinate who went along with him. It was the enemy himself. In the long history of his reading, Chen-Ong had never seen such a stupid lich. This was a negative example of how a lich protects his soul box, making all the stupidest mistakes possible, except for the last point, which was quite creative. Seeing Chen Ong close the magic book in his hands with a long sigh, Gru finally had time to ask for Chen Ang's instructions. Master, the relevant materials have been prepared. I've already caught a Death Eater with the Black Devil mark, and I've also obtained the map of Azkaban, although the Magic Execution Department has placed it on a small magically protected island in the cold waters of the North Sea. But this is not enough to trouble the Great Master. Now we just need something to deal with the Soul Eaters. Ignore the Soul Eaters, let's go to Azkaban now. Chen Ong picked up another black leather book beside him and laughed softly at Gru. In regards to the origin of black magic to create soul vessels, some ancient wizards have proposed an interesting possibility. In ancient Egypt, the god of strength, Seth, murdered his brother Osiris, and Osiris' son, Horus, devoted himself to avenging his father. In the end, under the judgment of the gods, Horus and Seth divided Egypt into two parts, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. And Horus' father, the god of the underworld, Osiris, was dismembered by Seth. In the end, Horus collected most of Osiris' remains. Only one piece was swallowed by a crocodile, and its whereabouts were unknown. However, Osiris was resurrected with the help of Anubis. Many ancient wizards believe that this is the origin of soul vessels. Chen Ong picked up the black metal book and said softly, "The black magic to create soul vessels retains the knowledge of Osiris' immortality, but it lacks the knowledge and power of Osiris' resurrection, not to mention the secret that later made Osiris the god of the underworld. And aren't Voldemort's loyal followers pursuing the former?" Chen Ong smiled. "Resurrecting Voldemort as a mummy. I know they found an ancient resurrection spell, the flesh of servants, the bones of their ancestors, and the blood of their enemies." Gru trembled at the side as he listened to Chen Ong continue. Everything they pursued was in this book, the Black Scripture of the Dead, which recorded all of Anubis's secrets and power. It was Anubis who resurrected Osiris, and it was Anubis who gave up the position of god of the underworld to Osiris. Everything that Voldemort pursued his entire life was in here. Of course, if he wanted to obtain eternal life, in addition to this Black Scripture of the Dead, he would also need the Golden Sun Scripture. If this scripture fell into Dumbledore's hands, he would be able to easily use the soul vessels to kill all of Voldemort's soul fragments. If Voldemort obtained this book, he would be able to resurrect in an even more powerful state, becoming a demigod mummy, eliminating all the future troubles of having his soul split. This Black Scripture of the Dead has extremely powerful black magic power. Anyone who obtains it will have the opportunity to become even more powerful than Voldemort. Gru stared blankly at the metal book in Chen Ang's hands, his eyes filled with passion and desire. He said timidly, "Master, apart from you, who else is worthy of such great power? This book should naturally be yours." Chapter 769. Chen Ong stood on the bow of a sailboat in the open sea of the North Atlantic Ocean near Norway. The deck under his feet was soaked black by the seawater. A large number of shells and barnacles were parasitic on the ship's body. There were some holes in the decaying hull, and the sails that were flapping in the wind were riddled with holes. The sailboat was mysterious and quiet in the thick sea fog. It was a ghost ship. Unlike the ghost ships and ship monsters that were commonly seen in the magic world, Chen Ang's ship was a ghost ship that had been resurrected by himself. He had used magic to raise a sunken 16th-century Spanish galleon in the English Channel, manipulating arcane energy to transform and revive it. He had used some of the magic from the Faerun arcane system to create Ghost Ship. Although it lacked the negative energy plane as the source of the transformation, this ghost ship did not live up to its name. However, after turning the resentment of the dead sailors on the sunken ship into the spirit of the ship, it looked like a ghost ship. According to the ship's name, it should be the Spanish Invincible Fleet of the English Channel War of 1588, the Santa Felipe. According to the records, this galleon was one of the main warships of the Portuguese fleet led by the Spanish commander Recalde. On the 8th of August, 1588, after a battle with the English fleet near Gravelines, it hit a reef and sank in a storm. The ship had a displacement of about 800 tons and a total of 40 cannons. When it sank, it carried about 415 soldiers and 117 sailors. Most of these people did not manage to escape from the sunken Santa Felipe, and in the end, turned into ghosts that haunted the ship. After the ghost ship woke up, it greedily devoured the ghosts of the drowned sailors in the sea. Its planks were like the body of a living creature, wriggling to repair the broken hull of the ship over the years. Under the infusion and activation of Chin Ang's powerful arcane energy, the hull of the ship changed. The strong arcane energy made the hull unusually tough. The 40 cannons on the ship merged with the hull and were transformed into life constructs. The only way to reach Azkaban was by land or sea. In order to ensure that no one could escape from this prison, the Ministry of Magic did not build a network of airplanes on this island. Instead, they used a powerful magic to hide the island and forbade people from using phantom shift in Azkaban. For most of the 50s, the only way to reach this island was to be captured by the orb. But this didn't mean that Azkaban was invulnerable. Otherwise, the big prison break in 1996 and the escape of Sirius wouldn't have happened in the future. It was very tight to outsiders, but for the prisoners inside, there were many loopholes. Master! Gru trembled as it prostrated itself at Chun Ang's feet. Azkaban has been cast with a powerful loyalty curse. Other than the Ministry of Magic's secret guards, no one can find it. It has a total of 5 confidential people. Apart from the public director of the Magic Execution Division, the identities of the other 4 are strictly confidential. But I still found out the identity of one of them. Master, let me bring him here! Gru screamed. Chen Ong only laughed softly after hearing this. No need. I asked you to find the former Death Eater. Have you found him? Gru prostrated itself at his feet and said in awe, I've found him. Master, I'll bring him here now. After saying this, Gru took 2 or 3 steps back. After leaving Chen Ang's sight, it used phantom shift and disappeared into thin air. After a while, it dragged over a man with filthy hair that looked like a homeless man. The man lay in front of Chen Ong and looked like he wanted to vomit. Gru screamed, You dirty mudspawn, how dare you be so presumptuous in front of Master? If you dirty the deck in front of Master, I'll cut your heart and bones until you die. The man heard Gru's threat and shuddered. He looked up and saw Gru's current appearance. His eyes immediately widened and he stammered, Mr. Boijin, how did you? He looked up and saw Chen Ong. He was even more confused. Mr. Boijin, so you're here. Can you give me the 20 gold coins you promised me? Gru respectfully introduced the man to Chen Ong. Master, this is Adonis Selwyn. His family are pure-blood supporters of Voldemort. However, even among the Death Eaters, he was the one who was looked down upon. Before he was 10, he was almost a squib. His brother, Selwyn, a loyal follower of Voldemort, even wanted to strangle him to death. However, when he was about to suffocate, he produced a small magic riot. Because of this, he was recognized by the Selwyn family. However, his magic was extremely weak, and he was widely ridiculed among the Death Eaters. But because of this, he escaped the punishment of the Ministry of Magic. The wizards believed that even if he wanted to do evil, he would not be able to do it with his magic power and the level of magic spells. But even though he was a half-squib, Adonis still had a cruel heart. I know that he secretly hunted down muggles who were powerless to resist, because he believed that those black magic rituals could make his magic power stronger. He did many evil things, but he was never suspected by the Ministry of Magic. Adonis trembled under Chen Ang's cold and calm gaze. He gathered his courage and said to Chen Ong, Mr. Boijin, what do you want me to do? As long as you pay me, I can do anything for you. No, I don't need you to do anything. Chen Ong shook his head indifferently. He reached out and stripped Bujin's true name from his body, temporarily giving it to Gru. As Gru convulsed violently, it reverted to Bujin Bork's appearance. At the same time, Adonis saw Chen Ang's true appearance. That Asian appearance was very eye-catching. Chen Ong absorbed the arcane energy from the Well of Eternity. In the void, energy tides that Adonis could not see surged towards him. Following Chen Ang's arcane magic, Chen Ong opened the coordinates to the Faerun universe for him. A ray of starlight crossed the multiverse and landed on Chen Ang's body, turning into a black robe. Chen Ong obtained the true name he wanted from another multiverse. Although his face did not change, in everyone's eyes, he was already a different person. My name is Darth Morgoth. So said Darth Aeon Chen Morgoth. Morgoth lightly pointed in Adonis's direction, and an intense magical aura drowned the man. A magic mark of a snake entrenched under a skull was extracted from the flesh that had been devoured by the specter ship. Chen Ong kept the black magic mark and used it to cast an arcane spell from the School of Prophecy. In the midst of magic, Azkaban's position was clearly determined. What does Azkaban have the most? Chen Ong turned to Bujin and asked. Bujin, who had already returned to his human form, did not change his servile nature. He smiled obsequiously and said, "It should be the Soul Eaters. But you can't catch the Soul Eaters. Otherwise, I could also use this arcane spell to locate Azkaban." Bujin knew that Chen Ong was expressing his dissatisfaction with the progress of his acquisition of the mystical animals. His forehead was immediately drenched in sweat, and his body was trembling slightly. His face was full of fear. Fortunately, other than the Soul Eaters, Azkaban has the most Death Eaters, and Voldemort likes to put magic marks on his believers. This way, he can know where they are, control their thoughts, steal the memories in their heads, and even control their lives. But through this, the dark demon mark floated on Chen Ang's fingertips. What Voldemort can do, I can do too. Chen Ong took out his new wand. It was a wand made of sea willow and dragon heartstrings. Chen Ong had made it in passing when he was making the specter ship. He did not need a wand, but as a reserve Dark Demon King, it would be too conspicuous if he did not prepare a wand. So he made this well-behaved and loyal wand. Sea willow was black coral, not a type of wood. It did not have the ability to channel magic like wood did. However, Chen Ong appreciated the feel of it. Although it was difficult, he still used arcane spells to modify the material, making it more compatible with magic. Chen Ong tapped his wand slightly, and a winged dragon flew out of it. It landed on Bujin's right arm, and accompanied by a burning pain, Bujin pulled back his sleeve. He saw a scarlet dragon spread its wings and coiled on his right arm. Through this tattoo, he could sense a vast energy source like the mouth of a well beside the moon in outer space. Powerful arcane energy condensed into a high-density form like well water, and lingered in the arcane well. An endless stream of arcane energy flowed from the tattoo, giving Bujin waves of pleasure. Arcane energy could easily be converted into magic, nourishing his bloodline. It was a powerful feeling, and Bujin was intoxicated by the flow of this power. He greedily wanted to absorb more, but after reaching a certain point, he was blocked by an invisible restriction. This is my arcane mark. You can call it Milko's star. Not only can this mark contact me at any time, but it will also convey my orders at any time. At the same time, it is also a beacon that allows you to receive the arcane radiation from the Well of Eternity and borrow its power. However, there are 9 levels of authority in the Well of Eternity, and I am only giving you the first level. Do you want more power? Then pray for my blessing. However, this blessing can become a punishment at any time. If you do not satisfy me, then the radiation from the Well of Eternity will no longer be pure arcane energy. Instead, it will be like maggots in your bones, a curse that will cause you extreme pain. From now on, you will call me Morgoth. This name has an extremely powerful magic that allows you to borrow a bit of my power. At the same time, anyone who says this name will fall into my eyes. Any words that contain this name will fall into my ears, and you will even be under my protection. After you say this name, your communication with each other will be under my protection. It will not fall into the ears of anyone who is not favored by me. Anyone who says this name will be rewarded and cursed by me. If you say this name in the midst of fire, you will not be harmed by the fire. If you say this name in the water, you will not be suffocated by the water. If you say this name in the presence of weapons, the sharp blades will not be able to touch you. If you say this name under the influence of a curse, you will not have any fate with death. This is my protection curse for you. Chapter 770. The ghost ship moved forward in the thick fog. The dark magic mark floated above the bow of the ship, emitting a green glow to guide the ship. Around them was a thick curtain of sea fog. Gollum finally stood on the deck as Bwajin. He still had the dignity of a house elf, but to others, he had regained the appearance of a wizard. This made him look like a house elf with the fawning and subservient expression, and Bwajin's body. It looked a little awkward. After Chern Ong maliciously transformed him into a house elf, the ancient wizard's contract spell and curse had permanently destroyed a part of his knowledge. Chern Ong was extremely interested in this kind of magic, and had been collecting data related to Gollum. The dark magic mark of the snake under the skull was emitting a stronger and more stable green light, which meant that they were getting closer to Azkaban. Gollum reported to Chern Ong in a low voice what he knew about Azkaban. There are actually very few auras stationed there. The Ministry of Magic once stipulated that at least a squad of auras must be stationed there. But later, the auras strongly protested. They did not want to stay with the Soul Eaters, and they did not want to be stationed in a place without a flying network, where even owls do not come. You see through everything, Master. The auras are only afraid of the boredom and hard work. Ever since the Fairy Rebellion, there are fewer and fewer wizards who can bear the loneliness and boredom. They are even afraid of staying with the Soul Eaters, and regard guarding Azkaban as a chore. In the end, the Ministry of Magic symbolically arranged for 2 people to be stationed here. One is an old aura who is about to die, and the other is often absent. Handing over the most dangerous prison of the Ministry of Magic to a group of greedy black magic creatures that want to suck human souls without any supervision. Chern Ong sneered. Which genius came up with the idea of letting black magic creatures guard the dark sorcerers? Was it because they were afraid that they would not collude? For the group of officials in the Ministry of Magic, I'm afraid they think the Soul Eaters are more reliable than the auras. Gollum mocked. Soul Eaters naturally hate all humans and wizard. They suck human life and happiness, and hate all creatures that are not them. Many famous light wizards have proposed to exterminate these black magic creatures, but the Soul Eater's office under the Ministry of Magic's Magical Animal Control Department strongly opposed it. They claimed to respect the survival rights and cultural customs of the Soul Eaters, and give them the freedom to live according to their own way of life. This proposal received the approval of many magical animal protection experts. They proposed racial equality and gave the Soul Eaters the rights of humans. Ever since the 14th century, the president of the Wizard Parliament, Burdock Malden, held a summit meeting among the races of the magic world and tried to grant human rights to the dodging bird, Fwop, elves, fairies, foxes, and trolls. Since then, the Ministry of Magic has been in chaos over this issue. It was not until 1811 that the new Minister of Magic, Grogan Stump, issued an order to define human as any creature that has enough intelligence to understand the laws of the Magic Society, and bear part of the responsibility in the process of making these laws. According to this definition, under the efforts of the Soul Eater's Office of the Ministry of Magic, our Soul Eaters actually obtained human right. It's worth mentioning that the centaurs and murlocs, who were truly recognized as humans, later voluntarily withdrew from the ranks of humans and chose to be magical animals. This may have something to do with the protection of magical animals. After all, there are many magical animal reserves, such as the Forbidden Forest and Atlantis, where only magical animals are allowed to live. From then on, the rights of the Soul Eaters were protected by the Ministry of Magic, and every wizard was required to respect their right to absorb human souls. In order to better use the power of the Soul Eaters to serve the Ministry of Magic, a genius minister of the Ministry of Magic proposed to let them guard Azkaban. This not only respected the rights of the Soul Eaters, but also did not violate the safety of the wizards. This genius proposal caused the average lifespan of the prisoners in Azkaban to never exceed 10 years. Chunong lamented, "So that's how it is. I didn't know there was such a strange story in the world of magic. The wizards actually didn't let the Soul Eaters receive education and obtain the right to enter Hogwarts to study. They are really discriminating against them. When I become the headmaster of Hogwarts, I will definitely apply to the Ministry of Magic to specially recruit the Soul Eaters and other human-like races that can't enjoy the treatment of wizards. I want to add a Soul Eaters Academy, and possibly a Vampire Academy, so that these vulnerable groups and special races can enjoy their right. Also, humans who can use magic are called wizards, but these races that have obtained the rights of humans don't have an equivalent status. I think we should call them minority races with special rights, or minority races for short. How about that? And for the minority races like the Soul Eaters who have special lifestyles and magical bloodlines, they should be treated even more specially. In order to show this special benefit, we should call them God Race, so that the wizards know the importance of this." Chunong said this sarcastically and turned his head in the direction of the bow of the ship. There came the sound of waves hitting the reef. Looking at the corner of the dark gray reef that was exposed in the thick fog, everyone knew that the most feared and taboo topic in the world of magic, Azkaban, was right in front of them. Chunong took out the wand in his arms and whispered, "For this, I will grant them equal rights to die and be experimented on." The Spectre ship took a big turn in the deep water port before it found the port to dock. As soon as Chunong stepped on the dock, the surrounding fog receded like the tide, and the blue sky appeared in the sky. The whole island was clearly visible in front of Chunong's eyes. It was as if he had crossed two worlds with just one step. In the distance, there was a castle-like building with a creepy silence. A figure like a small gray dot walked towards Chunong from afar. He carried a broken lantern and stumbled on the small path. It was a very old wizard. He was wearing a tattered gray robe, and his mind was not clear. He shouted at Chunong and the others from afar, "Muggles, this is not a place for you to be. Damn, the curse cast by the Ministry of Magic has gone wrong again. Are they only protecting Merlin's boots?" Chunong ignored him and quietly walked towards Azkaban. The old Auror took out a moldy twig-like wand from his arms and pointed it at Chunong with a trembling hand, as if he wanted to cast a forget-everything spell on him. But how could Gru, who was following closely behind Chunong, not react? He subdued the old wizard with a disarm spell. Chapter 771. What an exquisite concealing spell! Chunong exclaimed. The sunlight shone on Chunong's fingertips, which were in contact with the door of the castle, and a long shadow was projected on the door of the castle. Chunong's palm gradually became parallel to the door of the castle. The shadow of his hand stretched out from the door, and when his hand reached into the door, the shadow of his hand stretched out from the door and intersected with his fingers. Chunong flipped his hand and switched places with his own shadow. In front of him, the whole world suddenly turned upside down. The shadow of the island where Azkaban was suddenly became three-dimensional, and the sunny island instantly turned into a shadow. Heavy rain poured down from Chunong's head, and the wind raged wantonly. Chunong was on a small island that could only be called a reef. He looked back, but did not see any trace of the specter ship he was on. What appeared in front of him now was the real Azkaban. It was hidden by an ancient concealing spell on an isolated island in the North Sea. Someone had used a spell to divide the space here into two worlds. The one in the fog seemed to be protected by the spell, but it was only the Azkaban of the surface world. Only through the shadow could one enter the real Azkaban. A short shadow appeared under Chen-Ang's feet, and Gru walked out from the shadow. This island was astonishingly small, and the entire castle occupied 90% of its land. The shape of Azkaban was a triangular tower. A corner of the tower's front had collapsed, and the Soul Eaters were flying above it. Huge waves crashed against the base of the tower, and it seemed that this place was always in a violent storm. The waves slapped against the reef under Chen-Ang's feet, and the splashing waves splashed behind Chen-Ong. The Soul Eaters dancing in the wind found traces of Chen-Ong, and they whistled. This was the sound of the wind, and the Soul Eaters themselves did not make any sound. Chen-Ong could only smell the stench of decay and death brought by the seawater. He saw these black-robed monsters, their black robes fluttering in the wind. Their hollow bodies were wrapped in black cloth, and they swooped down towards Chen-Ong. Gru, who was behind Chen-Ong, had already pulled out his wand nervously. At the tip of his wand, a sparkling white light had already begun to flicker. I didn't expect a dark magus like Bujin to know how to call for God's protection. Chen-Ong thought calmly, and then he activated the true name that Morgoth had given him. At this time, the existence known as Chen-Ong gradually shrunk back into his soul, and the external body that belonged to Morgoth replaced Chen-Ong. At this time, a figure that was about 3 times the height of a normal person appeared where Chen-Ong had disappeared. His face was hidden in the darkness, and only a pair of eyes that shone like raging flames were as bright as fire in the darkness. The Soul Eaters that swooped down towards Chen-Ong saw that pair of eyes, and they all let out roars that sounded like the vibration of their decaying vocal cords. In the midst of the storm, the black-robed Soul Eaters that looked straight into the eyes let out the last and first roar of their lives, and turned into a handful of black ashes in the wind and rain. The ashes were swept away by the storm in the blink of an eye. In the area enveloped by Morgoth's power, it was as if the surrounding light was slowly fading away. The Soul Eaters lost their power and had no choice but to descend. Their black robes became powerless and soaked, and they drooped on the ground. Morgoth absorbed their power and souls as easily as darkness. Gru became smaller and smaller in front of Chen-Ong, who had transformed into Morgoth. He crawled on the ground in fear, because he felt that the figure in front of him was the source of all evil and darkness. The evil power that the Soul Eaters were proud of was as tender as a baby and as humble as a servant in front of him. So much so that Morgoth did not need much strength to easily enslave their souls. He wrapped his own power around their bodies, and the intense pain of eroding their souls made the Soul Eaters struggle continuously. However, they could not resist such dark power. More Soul Eaters rushed out of the triangular tower of Azkaban. They gathered together, like a black tide surging out of Azkaban. These prison guards tumbled in the sky, swooped down, and then fell one by one, forming a puddle on the surface of the sea. Their soaked black robes tangled in the seawater. Bujin watched as the most terrifying evil creatures in the stories of the wizards wailed at the feet of Chen-Ong. They did not make a sound, but their invisible bodies under the black robes twisted and trembled, appropriately expressing their fear, and pain. Morgoth's figure turned back to look at them. He stretched out his inhuman hands that seemed to be condensed from darkness and pushed open the door of Azkaban. The inside of the prison was dark and damp, and the space for people to walk in was extremely narrow. Morgoth's figure gradually faded, and the black fog slowly dispersed. The figure inside also returned to normal. He walked into Azkaban. As he moved forward, the darkness inside instantly expanded the space. The ground was damp and rotten. Some lobas and carnivorous slugs were wriggling on the stone floor of the tunnel, and some mottled rays were breeding. When they were not moving, they looked like a faintly green fungus with eyes. There were also a few hairy crabs that made their homes in the dark corners of the walls. These magical creatures usually had very strong vitality, and sometimes the wizards had to use special potions to get rid of them. But as Morgoth gradually approached, a deep dark power gradually shrouded the space. The bodies of these tenacious little creatures gradually withered and died. Their vitality disappeared in the darkness. The darkness that once protected them at this moment took their lives. Rabastan Lestrange was playing with a toad. This was the only game he had been able to vent the madness and despair in his heart since he had been imprisoned. The riot of the Dementors just now had attracted the attention of most of the prisoners, but Rabastan just shouted, "It's most likely those mudbloods from the Ministry of Magic making trouble again. I really hope that the Dementors can suck their dirty souls dry." Rabastan was dirty all over in the prison. Under his messy black hair, his face was pale and thin. After shouting a few words, Rabastan wisely shut his mouth, because his most feared sister-in-law, Bellatrix Lestrange, was screaming frantically, "It's him! It's Lord Voldemort, he's here to save us! I knew that Lord Voldemort may have lost temporarily, but he will never lose to those mudbloods." Rabastan, who lowered his head again, was surprised to see that the toad in his hand had lost its life. It was as if something in the darkness was absorbing its vitality. The body of this fragile little creature withered into a piece of skin. Rabastan felt that the darkness around him seemed to be much thicker, and an inexplicable coldness enveloped his body. In his already exhausted body, traces of energy were clearly fading. Rabastan felt as if he couldn't breathe. His mind was blank, and the warmth between his mouth and nose was being sucked away by the darkness. A numbness different from the Dementor's kiss gradually took control of him. On the outside, his skin was so pale that the blue-black blood vessels underneath could be seen. In his blurred vision when he was suffocating, Rabastan, who was leaning against the fence, saw an indescribable figure coming from the side.